Koutou katoa ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Welcome everyone to this, the last Sustainability and Community Resilience Committee meeting for this triennium. We'll start today with a karakia from Councillor Davidson.
Whakatakatehau ki te uru, whakatakatehau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, ki mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atu kura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, ti he moriora.
Kia ora. Thanks for that, Mike. We next move on to apologies. We've got an apology from Councillors Goff and Chen for early departure and the Mayor for lateness. I have a mover for those. Anne and Pauline for seconding. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Declare that carried. Thank you. I'll also note that we have 4 councillors currently, Councillor McClellan, Chu, Chen and Major on Zoom. And so welcome, and I think Councillor Donovan's on there as well, but with her video off due to being quite unwell. And that's all good today. So any declarations of interest? Councillor Johansson?
I mean, it's sort of a partial one for the housing. Obviously I'm on the OCHT, so just to disclose that. But
thank you.
Yep, cheers.
And confirmation of previous minutes. Can I have a mover for those, please? Councillor Turner and Councillor Davidson. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? No, declare that carried. Thank you very much. Right, we now move to public forum. So I'd like to start by welcoming Amanda Dodd, Deputy Manager of Health Promotion on behalf of the Cancer Society, to talk to us about Smoke-Free Aotearoa 2025. Yes, welcome. And I'll just get you to start by turning on your microphones at the front there. They're connected, so just one of them does all three. That's it. So welcome, you've got 5 minutes to talk to us today.
Kia ora koutou, councillors. My name's Amanda Dodd and I'm with the Cancer Society here in Canterbury West Coast. I'm here with my colleague Carmel Gregan-Ford, who's the chair of Smoke Free Canterbury. And we're here today just to give you a brief update on the government Smoke Free Action Plan and the forthcoming legislation. We'd like to really acknowledge the work of all partners of Smoke Free Canterbury and to acknowledge the sad passing of Dame Araha Rarity Crofts recently, who I'd like to really acknowledge her smoke-free leadership in the community. So I guess we can ask ourselves, why is smoke-free still an important issue in terms of public health and for the well-being of our communities? Smoking remains a major contributor to disease and premature death in New Zealand. We know that whilst we've done great things to bring down smoking rates, that's not felt equitably by all members of our community. So our Māori and Pacific communities still have smoking rates much higher than that of the overall population. We should not forget that the Māori Affairs Select Committee almost 10 years ago actually set forth some quite bold recommendations of how we can progress to the Smoke-Free 2025 goal. Many of them have not progressed. So the Smoke-Free Action Plan, released in December of last year, is a really good vehicle for making progress in those areas for Māori and for our vulnerable communities. So the Action Plan has 6 key focus areas. And really the overarching goal is to reduce the harm that tobacco causes our communities. We shouldn't forget that 5,000 people die of smoking-related diseases each year, and that means 13 people will die today, tomorrow, and the next day. The proposals in the plan really set forth some bold action, and this is what we feel will actually move forwards towards our goal. Some of these areas will actually require legislation, and an amendment bill is soon to be consulted upon. And I'll hand over to Carmel, who'll talk a little bit more about that legislation.
Kia ora. For those areas, an amendment bill will be introduced to Parliament in June. For the legislation that the government intends to progress would significantly and progressively reduce the use and prevalence of smoked tobacco products by significantly reducing retail availability. For instance, going from an estimated 6,000 retailers selling tobacco to 500 who would need to meet specific requirements to be able to sell tobacco. By restricting access to smoked tobacco products, for example through the smoke-free generation movement, therefore to make it an offence to sell or supply tobacco products to people born after a certain date, and reducing the appeal and addictiveness of smoked tobacco products by introducing low nicotine tobacco. These policies will work together on a population level to fundamentally change smoking in New Zealand. Smoke-Free Canterbury will be actively encouraging submissions from a wide range of partners, ranging from our local authorities to whānau and communities. We would strongly encourage a submission from the Christchurch City Council as a council with an already progressive smoke-free policy. We will be talking to the Policy Forum at the Canterbury Mayoral Forum in early July, and we'd also like to draw your attention to the Kaipara District Council remit that has been taken to the Local Government New Zealand Conference in July. This remit is that the Local Government New Zealand requests the government to restrict the sale of vaping products to under R18 specialist vape stores and to develop proximity limits to prevent the clustering of vaping product retailers and protect young people. Smoke-Free Canterbury looks forward to supporting implementation of the plan across our region. Thank you, and we welcome any questions.
Right, well, we do have a minute for questions. Do we have a question from the floor, Aaron?
Yeah, your stats early on over the percentages of especially Māori and Pacific smoking, do we know why they're so high and after so long of trying to target reductions? Is work done to work that out?
That there has been a lot of work done and we are making progress in that. The latest figures are a reduction consecutively over years. But I guess there are a number of factors. So say, for example, in our lower income areas, tobacco retailers are probably present 4 times more than in a more affluent area. So that will have an impact. And also the accessibility to public health services, so cultural barriers that might actually limit people from accessing the support they need. Part of the action plan's response is to develop workforce capacity for Māori and Pacifica health care workers who can actually be involved frontline in that wraparound care and support to encourage people to quit smoking and remain smoke-free during that time. So not being Māori, I think it would need to be a Māori organisation to talk to that. But we certainly know that there are tried and tested responses and we probably haven't had enough investment in that so far. So we need more progressive action.
Right, because the numbers are lower than they once were.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're just out of time, but I will ask, because Jimmy's got a quick question. Jimmy?
Okay, quickly question regarding to the cigarette killed 4,500 people, also the second-hand smoked 350 died. That's nationwide. But how about Christchurch and Canterbury? Much.
So do we know by region the statistics?
In terms of smoking rates?
Yeah, I think he was talking about death rates.
Probably not specifically for the region.
Okay, no, we don't have those, Jimmy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, and it's really good to get an update. And while it's clear we won't be quite there by 2025, I think that, you know, the work that you're doing is really important for getting us as far as we can, as quickly as we can. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next we have Dr. John Milligan from the Food Bank, Aotearoa, New Zealand. So welcome, John. And thank you to Councillor Galloway for organising John to come along today.
Tēnā koutou and Morena. I'm John Milligan, the CEO and co-founder, along with my wife Janice, of Food Bank Aotearoa, New Zealand. Food waste, which we really want to talk about briefly with you guys this morning, food waste is a really big deal. It's when food is thrown away, it's buried in the landfill, decomposes without oxygen, and that releases methane, which is a phenomenal toxic gas, greenhouse gas. Some say it measures about 84 times more potency than carbon dioxide. And when the gas is trapped in the landfills, of course, it increases the Earth's temperature and the heat rises in there phenomenally. And food waste constitutes about 8% of all our landfill waste, which is quite horrendous. Bread, for instance, is the greatest producer of methane gas in our landfills. And in New Zealand here, we throw away 20 million loaves of bread a year. So you can imagine what that does to our landfills. The carbon footprint is greater than the airline industry in total. And don't think just because we live in pure green New Zealand here, we are exempt from all this. We are ninth on the OECD list of food wastage, which is quite an indictment in our country here. But food banking is a green solution. 6 years ago, Food Bank Aotearoa, New Zealand's first pickup was 15 sandwiches from the Wishbone Cafe in Jelly Park. 15 sandwiches that didn't go to the landfill on that particular day. And today and every day, Food Bank will process and redistribute around 5 tonnes of food to our 106 member beneficiary organisations, everyone from the City Mission, St Vincent de Paul, to the family that provides the food for the homeless in Latimer Square on Sundays. The Marais, all the women's refuges, Plunkets, Whale Pacifica, the list just goes on and on. And this food that we provide resources 284,000 meals into this city every single month. Every month in our city. And that's a reduction of 830,000 kgs of toxic gas from our landfills, which is a phenomenal amount. Unfortunately, in this country, there's no cohesive policy platform underpinning the goal of individual food security and especially food wastage and its effect on climate change in New Zealand, apart from a rather inconsequential parliamentary briefing paper that came out 2 years ago, and I presume it's now filed in some filing cabinet in Wellington. But we believe that we need a plan, and can only be achieved by working collaboratively towards an agreed goal, but it needs a major driver. And it is our advocacy, in all humility here, that Christchurch local government could become this major driver and lead the initiative, which ultimately could become national policy. And once again, Christchurch could become a leading light in this country. And this is in line with your proposed working group that you're already talking about here. So it's nothing new. And it's been done before. Canada went through this process a few years ago, and it's now legislated for in Canada, and it's part of their driving force. So we know it's an ambitious vision, but how do we create that sense of urgency that will spur this rapid innovation? And Madam Chair, if this committee wants to take effective food waste on climate change seriously, I'd like to propose 4 things to you guys here this morning. That Anne is very involved with us at Food Bank and has been around and seen what we do over there. And I would recommend that each and every one member of this committee come in and see what we operate in our facility just over the railway line in Riccarton here. Every morning, Monday to Friday, around 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning, you'll see the whole operation in full swing, and it'll be great for you guys to come in and see that. I'd also advocate that we need to look at a full presentation to this committee or to the working group on food waste in relation to climate change, because it is a massive, massive issue. And I firmly believe that we need to create and fund an active, accountable working group here, and it possibly could be within the bounds of your proposed working group, Madam Chair, that will look at food waste and climate change. And, if it's created and it's funded and it gets a short-term accountability, like a year or a year and a half, I'm sure that we can do it, and I firmly believe that we can do it. And finally, also, from a Food Bank Aotearoa New Zealand side, I'd like you guys to consider of investing substantially in what we do through the Sustainability Fund and other council mechanisms which we know are there, because we are a major player in the food waste climate change equation. So we need to speak up and stand up for the causes that make some feel uncomfortable, but they're there. We need to welcome conversations that expose alternative perspectives today. We need fresh thinking. We need a fresh energy. We need to be more adaptive from the past, because this is a new world that we now live in, and we need to address climate change. And food waste is a massive, massive element in the whole climate change equation. I know it'll take the courage to break what Greta Thunberg calls the blah, blah, blah of the immediate past, but it is there. Food waste isn't an environmental issue. It's a social problem. We need to get out and do it, and it needs to be done now. Madam Chair, it's over to your group and your working group.
I hope so. it's fair to say that with rising living costs and things, there's enormous benefits, both socially and environmentally, for cutting food waste.
Definitely.
And while we're out of time currently, what I'd like to do is to invite you in for a meeting with me and Councillor Galloway and some staff to talk about some potential next steps where we can work together more closely.
We'd really appreciate that.
Councillor Cotto.
And can I be there as well, please?
We'll do a
Thanks.
general invite.
Yeah, cool.
Yes,
I'm
I'd like to
deputy
be there
chair.
too.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
really
great.
appreciate that. Thanks so much for your time,
May not
councillors.
be for a couple of weeks. Everyone is very stretched at the moment.
Sure,
But we could go visit.
But it is definitely something that we'd like to do some more work on.
sure.
Thank
Thank you
you
so
very
much,
much.
Madam Chair. Thank you.
Could we organise that around going to visit, with the invitation to visit?
We could either, yeah.
Cool, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Next we have Izzy Evans, who's going to talk to us about the Hagley Film Project. And there's going to be a wee film. Is Izzy here? Oh, online.
Morena everyone, my name's Izzy Evans. I'm a current student at South Seas Film School here in Auckland. Last year I studied film and content creation in Christchurch, and for my final project I decided to make a documentary on Hagley Park. So the premise of my doco was to film at Hagley Park every day for 2 months in an effort to unravel and build appreciation for the hidden stories within the heart of Christchurch. There are many interwoven layers and concepts within the doco, but the idea is to allow you as the audience to create your own interpretation of the stories being told. Most crucial to this piece is to take you on an implicit journey of nonverbal storytelling. So with that being said, we're now going to watch Hagley Inside Out.
Thank you so much, Izzy. That's really cool. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but what I will ask is where do people find this if they want to watch it or share it again?
Yeah, so it's on Vimeo. I can send a link out to whoever would like to access that. So yeah, maybe ask whoever's running the tech.
I think Simone said that she can send it out. Is it available? So where you've got the link for Vimeo, is that just online for public viewing and stuff, or is that a special account?
Yeah, so at the moment it's password protected,
Okay.
but I'm happy to make that public as well if everyone wants to.
I just think
access
that
it.
there's probably quite some interest within the Christchurch community to be able to see that if you're interested in making that public. So that was just lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Right, now we move to deputations by appointment. So the first one is Don Gould, and Don Gould is going to speak to us in regards the draft submission on National Adaptation Plan, the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Tracker and Suburban Regeneration Biannual Report. Welcome, Don. You've been here before, so that you know that you've got the 10 minutes to talk to us on these today, and I see you've got a slide.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, members. We'll try and make this a little bit shorter because, ironically, I'm talking about priorities mainly this morning, so I should speed this up and get going. The question really is simply, how did we get here? It's just simple. There's too much on the agenda, taking electors' members time away from core business. Nothing gets done properly. Too much is glossed over, and the council's internal resources are spread too thinly with too much noise. My main concern today is the solutions. Push the noise off your agenda. Please focus. Please allocate more resources to what is left, the important matters. There will always be a paper from Wellington, a program that we could do better, a policy that we could be reviewing. Item 7, papers from Wellington are for general public to engage in my opinion, directly. Please leave it to the members of the public to make their own submissions if they choose. If they are unhappy with government policy, then there is an election. It is not the job of council to be the opposition. Government actually has an opposition, and too often council is undermining that process. Item 9, the dashboard supporting material really looks like the work of the Ministry for the Environment. Like social housing, also on the agenda, this appears to be a response to poor government policy delivery or simply a bunch of locals who want to swim in the same pool without being in Wellington. Item 12, reports come up for a review all the time. As governance, it's your role to push them off and have structures reviewed. I understand the Local Government Act may present requirements. At some point, we must test that when the demands are overwhelming us. We ended up with the chlorine in the water because we didn't push back. We didn't test, we didn't refuse, we didn't go to court. We are simply outgunned by Wellington, and they are now dossing us. You can read the quote for yourselves. The army of individuals processing the papers on the table could have been out on Friday where Stephen McPake was, on Monday tracking down hundreds of Prezi cards. The army could have been helping out staff who are currently overwhelmed. The solutions. Push the noise off your agenda. Please focus. Please allocate more resources to what is left, the important matters. Any questions?
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions from elected members? Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Just with the chlorine piece, that was going to happen whether we moved on it or not. But at the time, I personally just thought it was better to work with the District Health Board because they were also silent on it, that side of things. So my thinking at the time was to work with the District Health Board, and hopefully in the future they would support what we're doing with our water when we wanted to get rid of it, and perhaps central government didn't. What are your thoughts on that?
Actually, I disagree with your position, Tim, and I think you made the wrong decision at the time, and I was quite vocal about that at the time. I think that you should have, as a council, directly challenged the position of the government in the High Court and brought in some other governance. What we've actually seen is government policy run amok, and an initial commitment by this council to only authorise the chlorine in the water for 12 months has significantly overrun. We let them out the gate, assuming that we would be able to rein them back in for a situation that may unfold. It did unfold in Havelock North. It may have unfolded down here, was the argument. There was lots of pushback from the community stating that that would not be the case because of the way our infrastructure works compared with other bodies.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think it would have happened here.
Hang on.
But what?
I'm just aware that there's lots of questions, so we might just take a quick one from each person rather than in depth. Anne and then Pauline.
Yeah, kia ora. Hi, Don.
Good morning, Anne.
This morning you will have seen the variety of things that people have come to speak to us about. We've had food waste, and we've had a film about our wonderful Higley Park. We've had concerns about becoming smoke-free. So you have asked the question, or made the statement, that what is our core business? What is our core business? What is your view about our core business as elected members?
Well, and I certainly made that clear in 2018 when I first presented here on core business. I handed out a bunch of goodie bags and a bit of fun and made a bit of a joke of it, because at the time my sewer system was damaged, and that was keeping me awake for a quarter of an hour every 2 hours through the middle of the night and clearly affecting my mental health. It became evident, I think, to most members following me on social media at that time that I was questionably quite unwell. I've stepped up this time because I see an entire community of 90,000 people or more who are becoming unwell. Our core business is around supporting council assets in the first instance, the stuff that nobody else does. Wellington is currently threatening to come in and take over our water infrastructure. That's a threat, but it's not here doing it. And at this time, we have to be actually looking after those assets. This is also, you're right, that film we just watched a moment ago was absolutely stunning. There's no question. I don't think anyone would disagree with me that film was stunning. But I've also got members of the community just messaging me saying, why is this on the agenda? Why have these people been given 5 minutes? And given that they're not sleeping through the night, they're becoming unwell like I was, they are frustrated and their houses stink, I can kind of understand their question.
Okay, so we'll move to Pauline.
Oh, thanks. I'm just going back to the chlorine in the water that Tim alluded to, that we do have difficult decisions to make, particularly around spending ratepayer money and particularly around ensuring that the safety of our residents. So would you prefer that council spent ratepayer money on taking the government to court or improving our drinking water infrastructure to meet the new standards which were not apparent at the time of the chlorine?
Ironically, we have to do a bit of both. We actually do have to realistically address a bit of both. The reality is that our infrastructure, like Havelock North's, was not at an acceptable level for a 21st century country, for a first world 21st century country. But at the same time, the government has run around racking up the community with a lot of engagements, such as $6 million, I believe, spent on a cartoon advertising campaign, which has been widely criticised, including by the Broadcasting Standards Authority, ironically.
But our money, spending your money, would you rather we spent it on taking the government to court?
Yes, some of that I do, because that's bringing in a bigger bat to give a bit of a pushback and bringing in, rather than our staff, who are not lawyers, well, some of them are, but bringing in some high-quality legal representation. We've got 405,000 people in the city Pauline. So the amount of money that would need to be spent on that is not huge in the big scale of things, and perhaps it would slow down the onslaught of government pushing into our space that's just pushing too much noise on our agenda. Some of the water stuff that you folk have considered around the table in the last wee while about Three Waters has taken our focus away from an actual disaster that's unfolded in the eastern suburbs and become embarrassing.
Cool.
So, thanks, Pauline. Talking about disasters and future disasters and pushing back on government, all things you've addressed there. Are you aware of the content of the government's National Adaptation Plan and the onus it's going to put on councils and communities?
No, I haven't got a single clue about it. I didn't even know it existed until I saw it in the agenda today, Sarah. So through the chair, I might add that that is a failing by central government to actually effectively create awareness of its own plans and policies, and to actually engage with the community effectively. What they've done, by the looks of it, is come to your table and ask you folk to engage with it, and then in turn asked if you wouldn't mind seeing if I might like to have a say on that particular issue. And I find that unacceptable. They should be directly, through my local MP, engaging with me, and the opposition parties engaging with me and saying, hey Don, get in behind this and start having a voice to say on it, rather than taking staff time in this building away from the disaster that we actually have unfolding that's affecting people's sleep and well-being today.
So just so you know, that the draft submission on the National Adaptation Plan is doing what you asked for earlier and pushing back on something that government is looking to impose on councils in some ways that are helpful and some not. But your point around us focusing on the current issues about the wastewater is a really valid one, and one that is addressed at every council meeting currently. But I'd like to ask Jane Davis to address that, because you've raised an issue that if we weren't, for example, having this meeting, and if someone hadn't written a submission on the National Adaptation Plan, would the outcomes be better for that community currently? And
sorry, he
whether the
raised a number
resourcing
of
is
other
there.
items.
So I've asked staff to provide some advice on that.
Thanks, Sarah. No, from my perspective, releasing staff doing some other work would not have sped up anything that we're doing with the wastewater plant recovery and engagement with the community. So we've partnered with 4 agencies to help us roll out the support package. That's going really well. We've had over $85,000 worth of support already issued this week. We have had a bit of an issue with the Prezi card availability, so having more staff available wouldn't have made the Prezi cards turn up any quicker. So from my perspective, the team is doing a great job. We've got the resources that we need to respond.
And when were these reports written? When did they get signed off by ELT, and sort of how long has this process been to get them here?
Yeah, I can't speak for all of those, but I know that some of them have had quite tight time turnaround, so certainly the adaptation plan response has been quite quick, but some of them have been reflect work that's been going on for months and months as well. Yeah. So preparing those reports doesn't take up that much time of staff time. The work that goes underneath it that we're reporting on is ongoing work that our staff are doing and are continuing to do and have done for months.
Thank you. I will draw that deputation to a close now. Thanks for raising those issues, Don. I think that prioritising work is a key thing that needs to happen within council, both for the volume of work that comes across councillors' desks, but also making sure that we get the right things in the oversight piece, so that we can make sure the right stuff is happening. And that gets divvied up between the committees and to council. And after next week, everything will be going through the council meetings because the committees will be disestablished. So everything will go through that forum. But thank you for bringing that to us. And I'm sure that we'll see you again.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, the next one is Joanna Gould, who is going to speak to us in regards item 10, South Library, Te Kete Wananga o Waimokihi, earthquake repair option.
No.
I might kick you under the table to tell you what I'm doing next. Good morning. According to this article, Shirley Library is the second busiest suburban library, Fenderton's the first, and South is the second. South Library includes a traditional library, service centre, boardroom, meeting rooms, learning centre and cafe. Shirley Library is also considered a suburban library, and the green box is actually the library space, and the blue box is the service centre, New Zealand Post and the Coastal Burwood governance team. The revision youth audit has already highlighted the issues with the current Shirley Library. And Christchurch Libraries, this is what we do, why we do it, and our functions and services. The asset management plan summary on the libraries shows the key activity centres, and Shirley Library Shirley is also considered a key activity centre, but it's not included. It should be included because of the population in this area and the growth in this area. These are the replacement costs for the South Library and the Shirley Library. We already know on budget that's more for the South Library, and the Shirley Library is less than what is on budget currently. Here are the two libraries. Shirley was built in 1995, South was built in 2003. The capacity for Shirley is 3 times less than the capacity for South, yet we have a population density of 2,300 per kilometre square. This is the facilities rebuild plan. Shirley Community Centre and Shirley Library were both on this plan, the original plan, and there's nothing about South Library in this original document. The engineering reports, there's the one for South and the one for Shirley, and because of the age of the Shirley Library, there's concerns about the building type and the loads in an earthquake, so there's still issues from what I can read in these reports. This is the report that's on the table later on today. There's information about functionality. South don't have an issue with the size of their facility, just the layout, whereas Shirley already has said repeatedly through the youth and through the community that we don't have enough. And this is the Community Wellbeing Act, and it's supposed to help with socio-economic, environmental and cultural. These are the photos that I've already shown you previously. This is what our community see, a concrete car park. It's not in a green environment. When we're talking about community wellbeing and resilience, I don't think this fits the bill. The petition that we have been working on has got over 1,200 resident signatures, and this is the current Innes ward and the new Innes ward, and is significantly less in size because of the concentration of population in the areas of St Albans, Edgware, Shirley and Richmond. This is the 10 Shirley Road site. From my point of view, the difference it would make to the community wellbeing and community resilience is, you can't put a price on it as far as I'm concerned. And my question again, why are the communities around Shirley Road having to wait since 2012 for a new building to be built on 10 Shirley Road, and why has the council deferred funding this until 2030, 2031? So my last statement is, after reading this report on the South Library, I do not understand why the council would prioritise the repair rebuild of the South Library. The South Library is still in operation. The Shirley Community Centre was demolished. This proposal doesn't align with the council's policies on sustainability and environmental outcomes. There are suburbs across the city that are lacking community facilities. The current Shirley Library isn't fit for purpose and does not meet the needs of our growing population.
In my view, the council should not direct staff to engage with renewals while existing rebuilds have not been completed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Joanna? Tim?
Yeah, as the South Library Service Centre is up and running, did you know what its standard NBS it was before it was braced and what it is now?
No, I don't have enough information. I don't know enough about building reports to be able to tell you that off by hand.
Just to clarify, that's it. It is currently, or before the bracing, it was at 10%. At the moment, it's clawing, it's by the skin of its teeth at 34% NBS, and if it falls below that, it has to be closed. So that's one of the reasons.
That's why I put in the distance to Turanga, because from south it's only a small distance, whereas if anything happens to the Shirley Library, our closest library is Papanui Library or Turanga, and for the communities around those areas, we don't have the financial means to be able to come into town and then pay for parking, whereas a lot of these other community facilities have free parking associated to their libraries.
Okay.
Thanks. Pauline?
This is more of a question for a follow-up with staff. Can we please get an updated NBS or engineering report on the Shirley Library as it is now? I'm finding this slide very difficult to read, and I think Joanna implied it could be quite an old information.
Yes.
So could we please request that? Would be really good. Pardon?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Yanni?
Thank you, and I appreciate your submission. Do you think this is something that we should consult as part of our draft annual plan if we're going to, look at projects that are going to cost more money or change the timing or change what we do?
Yes, because a lot of the community don't read the papers unless they've got a specific interest in a topic, unless they're in touch with their council member. They don't know what's going on. A lot of people just assume that buildings are going to get repaired or rebuilt because of the earthquake and insurance payouts and all that kind of stuff. And so more information needs to come back to the residents, because unless you read the reports, and it's hard work reading all the reports and following along all the committee meetings and agendas, it takes a lot of time. And
right. And you, sorry, just to be clear, you made a submission to the draft annual plan.
Yes, I did.
Were you aware that the South Library budget was being moved forward by $4 million?
I wasn't, and I didn't realise it had almost doubled in costs as well. And that's when I saw the article. I was like, how is this a priority when it's got all the functions that we would love in our community and we don't have access to it? Our Kids Fest program is non-existent this school holidays.
So is it fair to say you would have made you would have said different things in the submission to the draft annual plan if you were aware that this was being considered?
We've just been basically waiting our turn. We thought once Hornby was done, we'd have an opportunity there. We've been basically told there's no money. Don't even bother asking the council to build a new facility because there's no money. Because of climate change and COVID issues, it's just not on budget, so don't ask.
It's in the long-term plan. It's in the plan.
We've added money in the long-term plan.
Yeah, but it's so far away. It's like...
No, we can always bring that forward.
Yeah,
once
and that's what I've been asking for the whole time.
But we have to be ready to do that.
Yeah, and that's my concern, is we just keep getting bumped out. The feasibility study a year on has had no progress, and it's like these communities are crying out, we're stuck in a small Shirley library. I don't even go to that library. I travel from a climate change point of view. I travel to Fendleton Library, which is over 7 kilometres away from where I live. And when I'm in town, I go to the South Library because it's got the park environment, it's got the free parking, it's got all the facilities and all the non-fiction books. We don't even have that. The kids have already said in their youth audit, we don't have what other libraries have, and it's not fair to call it a suburban library when it's not got the space and it's not got the facilities and functions that we should expect from a suburban library.
Okay, are there any further questions? No? Aaron.
Thank you for a great and passionate and well put together presentation, Joanna. A question you might know from your assistant is have you done a breakdown of the usage per square metre? So the number of people going in for the building usage per square metre?
No, I haven't. But
It'll be an interesting number
yeah,
to know.
It would be. We know
Given
it's
yeah, you know what I mean, by the
it's the
size
second
versus the others.
busiest, and it's doubled as our community centre as well as our library. There is nothing else. There's no other facilities in this area, and so everybody is basically stuck in this small space. And the capacity, so-called capacity, is 200 people, and we already know there's well and truly more than 200 people using that facility on a day. An interesting thing about the report, it said only 30% in the South Library use the computers. And it's like that is the main thing that people go to the Shirley Library for, to have access to computers and Wi-Fi. And it's like we don't even have the space to be able to have those facilities available to our community. And it's just unjust from my point of view.
Okay, we've got
Brilliant.
one quick last question from Councillor Major online.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Good, thanks.
That's very common sense what you're suggesting here. You are aware that the 30 where our old community centre is, or library is in Shirley, north of that, 30 houses have been sold by AMP.
Yes, I'm well aware of that.
I don't think we should lose sight of, and I'm not sure who's bought them, and I think a bit of investigation needs to be done, that if it is a big company that's bought it and is going to redo the whole thing, we should offer our building that's there into the mix, and then get the money for it, but lease it back for 3 years, whatever, and use the money for, it wouldn't certainly build the Shirley Library, but it'll go a long way towards getting it underway. So at least we can, even if we use the same plans when we go ahead with the South Library, use the same plans and just orientate it different on the section. That's sort of got to say to you, Bob, as well. But I'm just throwing ideas out there at the moment.
Okay, so I didn't hear a question in that, but it's a useful comment.
And the community board is already thinking of all this stuff. Thank you.
Yep. So yeah, I have heard the community board. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on now. Thank you very much for coming along. Yeah. Okay, so right, we've got no presentation of petitions, and so now we're moving to the draft submission on the National Adaptation Plan. So we have Jane coming down, but we're going to get Councillor Davidson to give a brief overview because this would have come to his committee, but for timing and other things.
Yeah, other things, not timing. Thanks, Sarah. Look, just quickly, obviously the purpose of the National Adaptation Plan is to help Aotearoa adapt to and minimise the harmful impacts of climate change, and this plan will build the foundation for adaptation action, and which obviously councils will play a key role in. And given both, the real risk to our city from climate change, sea level rise, and our experience from the earthquake in red zone and the work that we've already done in this space, like this council, I think, is uniquely positioned to add a lot of value to central government's National Adaptation Plan that will benefit our communities and our future communities in Christchurch. So, look, before I hand over to Jane, I just want to acknowledge the work that you have done in this space, and also your inclusion of councillors in the development of this plan. We've had a briefing, we've had email opportunities, and plus quite a comprehensive workshop, which has been really good and created actually a very good submission. But I'll hand over to you to present it. Thanks.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. Sarah, Tom and I will be presenting on the council submission today, but I also want to acknowledge it's had involvement from a large range of staff, and we have other people here, particularly from legal and planning, so if there are wider questions we can bring them in. Just a very brief presentation from us. So the consultation period has been those dates that you can see there, and what's been consulted on is the government's National Adaptation Plan, which sets out the actions the government will take over the next 6 years to build climate resilience. It also responds to the risks identified in the National Climate Change Risk Assessment, and those two documents will work in 6 yearly cycles over the foreseeable future while we understand and respond to climate change impacts. The final National Adaptation Plan is to be published in August this year, which is a reasonably short timeline from when the submissions will be received from across New Zealand. However, the managed retreat proposals that are also being engaged or consulted on at the moment have a longer window of time for influence. So the Climate Adaptation Bill is to be introduced late next year. So we see that as an opportunity for greater influence and in particular recognition of the ways that Councillor Davidson has talked about. We just have a very simple slide outlining the themes in our submission, but you will have seen it as quite a lengthy submission with some detailed information in it as well. I'll just roll through these reasonably quickly. The National Adaptation Plan is essentially a plan of plans, and we are looking at the timelines around some of the actions and the plans that are set out in the National Adaptation Plan, and we would like to see greater urgency and aspiration in the delivery of some of those actions. And just to give you an example, we are looking really forward to seeing the national standards that have been developed for the LIM notations that will help communities and local government work or understand more clearly what needs to go on those LIMs, but that's 2 years away from delivery. So that's the sort of thing we see as potentially not occurring at a fast enough rate. As you will all be very acutely aware, there is a lot of reform happening at the moment, and we are at the moment responding to consultations from central government on all of these pieces of reform, but without that clarity that we would like to see around the future of local government roles and responsibilities. So we are asking for some greater clarity in the roadmap around that reform program. The National Adaptation Plan, there's a lot of language in there around cost sharing, and that's something that I think we would all agree across all parties does need to occur, but the language in the National Adaptation Plan is very strongly around limiting Crown's fiscal exposure. It's quite heavy on local government roles and responsibilities and lighter on those of central government. So we're really asking for fair and reasonable funding arrangements commensurate to our responsibilities. If we do get greater responsibilities as a result of the actions in the National Adaptation Plan, we are seeking recognition that funding does need to accompany that. And we have flagged the New Zealand Land Transport Program model as an example of the sort of arrangement that we might be looking at, with the ability to gather funding through general taxation and distribute it according to need across the country. Another point that we've made is around the need for tools and guidance to be designed with end users to ensure they're fit for purpose. We really welcome additional tools, guidance and information. It's critical for us to help move forwards. But to date, some of the guidance hasn't been sufficiently implementation focused, and so it has left us with a bit of a gap around how actually we aren't expected to necessarily implement some of the information that we're getting or the tools that we're getting. And similarly, we're looking for a bit more localisation. So while we welcome an adaptation information portal, we would like that to include information that has been prepared locally around the country so that it is speaking to the local conditions as much as possible. We see an opportunity for a more community-centred approach. The engagement, and I think this was alluded to by one of the deputations, has been quite limited in terms of its focus with communities. There's been 2 webinars focused on communities, and we would like to see, given the gravity of the changes ahead of us, a bit more of an effort to take communities along on the journey. We also want to see greater emphasis on hazards literacy. It's all very well and good, and we know this ourselves, to produce, coastal hazards portals and provide people with information on LIMs, but they need the ability to understand and interpret that risk profile themselves and make decisions accordingly. So we think that's a really important component, and that hazards literacy and education needs to be targeted at people of all ages. Lastly, and possibly of most importance to us, of course, is learning from our experiences post-Canterbury earthquakes. We all went through a lot, communities and agencies, and we've all learnt a lot the hard way. And so we do think that it's important that our experiences are informing particularly the Climate Adaptation Bill, and we are a little bit missing in the current wording. So we have put forward to MFE that we would like to be a bit more involved in that. On that point, I need to raise a mea culpa. In the letter that accompanied the submission, you might have seen a reference to the Canterbury managed retreat process. I'm intending to take the word managed out. What I actually took out was the word retreat. So apologies. I had a feeling. I took the wrong word out, but that will be amended before it goes forward, because I think we need to acknowledge that we have been involved in New Zealand's most significant retreat, but it wasn't a particularly managed retreat, it was a reactive retreat. So that is something that we will change in the final wording. Our recommendation today is that you approve our draft submission, and now we're seeking any questions that you might have of us.
Right. Thank you very much. There's been a huge amount of work involved, and the Mayor has a question.
Oh, I don't have a question. I just have a big thank you. That's the one word that was in the entire document that I wanted to reference. So thank you so much for picking that up. I think the reference to it being managed retreat is not. We actually would like the optionality, and I think probably that's the question. Is the National Adaptation Plan? I know that it's a beginning stage, but it feels like there's two major things that you've picked up. One is the sort of absence of central government, at the table in terms of the checkbook, and the second one is that question about the other alternatives, which we are exploring in great detail around adaptation planning, because managed retreat is right at the end of that spectrum.
Thank you. Jimmy.
Oh, yes. One question. Thank you for your the comprehensive list submission and your report. My question is you particularly regarding the council submission, particularly you highlight two crucial points. I think that's very important. First one is take a community center approach. Second one is regarding to the central government regarding to this should be considered Canterbury earthquake experience. But I just want to know whether the office are aware a moment up to now whether have from the community or from community board have make the submission regarding to this the issue, or the other one regarding to the we learn from the Canterbury earthquake experience, whether have some other agencies, for instance like CDHB, Police St. John, Salvation Army, students, whether they have also make submission or not. I just want to know.
I'm afraid I can't answer for the agencies you've mentioned, but we know the Mural Forum, ECAN and Ngāi Tahu are submitting, and they have, in the documentation I've seen, referenced the earthquake experiences. The community boards did not take the opportunity to submit.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from people? If not, Mike, you happy to move that? Mel, would you like to second it? Yep. Okay, so moved Councillor Davidson, seconded Councillor Coker. Is there any debate? No, in that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Aye. Declare that carried. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your work. It's incredibly comprehensive. Right, next we move to the Community Social Housing Update Report through to the end of April. So welcome Bruce and Kate.
So thank you for having us. For a change, I'm trying not to talk, and I'm going to let Lisa Washington, who is my housing team, to lead this with Kate. But I'm here in case there's any questions I need to assist with.
Yes, the housing team of one. I haven't got too much to say over and above the report. I would just like, I guess, to point out that we are coming up to our 1 year anniversary of the change that we put in place with OCHT taking over all the major maintenance as well as the tenancy management and the minor maintenance. I think there has been some bumps along the road, but I actually think the relationship is working really well. I think the process is working well, and there's some really positive changes and stuff that are coming out of that. And with that, I think, it's giving council, it's giving us the opportunity to look at strategically like where we're going. And I think you saw that yesterday with building the relationships with OCHT and Christchurch NZ and other partners to work along that housing continuum to get from social housing and affordable housing in those mixed tenures. So I think it's exciting times ahead there.
I would, I guess, just point out, there is probably, the housing fund, it is still sustainable. If you look at the funding, it is, we have pointed out that it is low, but it's nothing that we hadn't already projected in our funds. We're still sustainable. These next couple of years will be tight, but we're aware of that and we're working towards that. But the reason it is low is because we have done some really good work in that healthy home space. We're in the process of, upgrading the units, making the units more fit for purpose. And I'll segue into Kate here because I know she's got some figures hot off the press about tenant satisfaction survey results, and I think that will show in where we're going as a team, I guess, with that.
So just further to what Lisa has mentioned, this will be the first year that Council has been able to upgrade homes outside of your earthquake repair program. So we are out upgrading, giving half-life renewals to interiors and exteriors, and the feedback we're getting from tenants is really, really impressive, to the point that tenant satisfaction with their units this year is 82%. Now, if you think back a few years ago, it was in the high 60s. Last year, we had a target of 70%. We achieved 79%, and that was again because of running the warm and dry program. When you look at the stats for satisfaction with the warmth and dryness of their homes, it's 94% satisfied with the heat pumps that have been installed. 87% of tenants believe their homes are warm and dry. That is significantly different than any feedback we've ever actually had in a tenant survey before. So as Lisa said, we're working together really well with the team of one. Lisa's having to cover our team of 50. We're doing really good work together. It has been a big year for us, just setting up the systems, setting up the teams. We believe our performance will improve again next year. We'll get to the targets for timeliness that we're all wanting to achieve, because we want to get homes upgraded and move on as quickly as possible so that we don't disturb our tenants too much. So kia ora, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, and there's going to be some questions. So Pauline, then Andrew.
Thank you for this great report, very positive. Just want to ask you some questions about energy light bulbs. So obviously, can you clarify that when you upgrade a unit completely, you switch to LEDs, I would assume?
Yes.
Yeah, so when you actually go in and just do some tinkering with some units that just need a little bit of repair, do you then upgrade the LED to LED, or do you just put in LED light bulbs? Do you know?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Cotter. So if we're doing a full upgrade, we will change all the light bulbs out for LEDs. If it's a vacant turnaround, depending on whether there is anything that needs to be fixed, we may upgrade some, we may not. I've got a number here actually. The vacant replacements, 620 units have had LED lights replaced, which is about 1,000 lamps. And as well as that, we ran a pilot project with Anglican Care, and that was just to see if by door knocking tenants' doors and offering them LED lights, would they be interested in us swapping them all out. So that was in 2019. We door knocked 80 homes. 60 of those homes said, yes, please come in, and they had an upgrade of their lights. So I suppose we could say we're getting to about, just very rough figures, maybe half of the portfolio may have LEDs now.
Right. I think that program the Christchurch Agency for Energy funded that.
Yes.
And that was just for bulbs,
yes,
not the actual when you switch the whole unit over, which you obviously do when you do a complete renewal. So it is on your radar and you do it.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Andrew.
Thank you. Bruce, this is for you, and I've highlighted that it might be coming already. Going back to 2018, there were some issues raised by particularly councillors Davidson and Johansson regarding the earthquake settlement on social housing. And it was thought at that time that there might be justifiable claims for additional payments relating in particular to asbestos removal, structural damage that wasn't apparent at that time, and damage to services that was not known at the time of settlement. As part of tidying up I'm doing of outstanding matters, I've raised this a number of times, most recently in mid-May, but I understand that you're able to give an update or a follow-up to that as part of this item today.
Yep, and apologies, Lisa gave me an update in last week, but I haven't had a chance to get that through to you, so apologies on that.
No problem.
So the current state is we have got our claim in, it's been accepted within the time limits, so there's no concerns about the claim being there. There's been acceptance that part of the claim is valid, and there's requests for more evidence for the rest of the claim, particularly around asbestos and some of the engineering works. So this basically comes from that in 2012, when we were doing the settlement, there was high-level estimates made on both what the asbestos would be in a particular building and what the engineering solution would be. When we've actually done the work, there's been more asbestos required in some case, or more asbestos found in some cases, and different engineering solutions have been accepted. So we're now having, and what's taking our time, and we need to address this further, so I'll go away and work on this to how we can do it, is finding the evidence and being able to show to a high degree of evidence that there has been that change in the amount of asbestos and why that's occurred, and similarly why we chose different engineering processes. It's taken too long, so my apologies on that. This sits with me. We'll work with EQC to finalise that, but I can assure you that the claim has been accepted and that parts of it have already been agreed. It's just the final quantum that we haven't agreed, as we need to get that last remaining evidence.
So what does governance oversight of that look like? Is this something that should be reported to Finance and Performance or the Insurance Subcommittee?
How about we commit to putting it into this report on an ongoing basis so that you've got that visibility?
Thank you.
Okay, we're not quite sure where this report will land next term, but will there be another one in sort of September-ish that goes to council?
Next one would be November, but we can...
New council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can get it through to the council, and then if there's a change in committee structure, that we can then get the appropriate committee that it goes to.
No, that's great. And as part of that, can we start looking at... I know we often talk in units, but we don't talk in capacity. And I think that as the portfolio has changed over time, it would be really good if we could start taking into account the number of bedrooms, if you like, rather than units, because I think that will tell a slightly different story. And if we could have that alongside as part of that data, that's probably quite useful.
Because you asked the question yesterday, Councillor, I thought, right, better go away and find out how many bedrooms we have. So I can say we've got 2,800 bedrooms, which is different from the reporting we give of the number of homes we have.
Yeah, and do we know how that compares to the number of bedrooms we had pre-quake? I didn't ask that yesterday, so I don't expect you to have that.
I can probably work that out for us and bring it to a next report.
Yeah, I think that would be really useful because the units have changed their makeup over time as well. Councillor Johansson.
Thank you. Just on page 25 on 7.2 under work program, 7.3, 54 units are closed due to age, condition, financial viability. The future of these buildings is currently being considered as part of new build financing options. And it goes on to talk about a number of those. So I had two questions relating to that. Is anything not being done because we don't have the finances to do it?
I don't believe that there is anything not being done. Things can be sped up if there was different finances. So if there was the work is being done, and the key ones from the points you've raised there relate to the Carey Street complex, which we'll be reporting a proposal to go through on the 14th of July. It also relates to the Andrews Street, Andrews Crescent area, where we are working with a partner to do some developments on, but not yet at a stage to be able to bring that through. And Sandylands, which we are working with a partner on as well. Dates, I think, probably around September.
That's September, hopefully.
We hope to be able to bring that finally back with a proposal around that date for those ones. So that the work is occurring on those sites and fitting futures.
Just to be clear, could you do more if you had more money available?
Officers are always going to say yes to that answer. I think that what we need to be discussing is how we structure this so that the appropriate level of ongoing funding is coming through. The funding that the portfolio gets at the moment, just over 50% is on grandparented rents, where the tenants pay round about 70% of their incomes. And 70% of market rent for those, which can have quite a large impact on their income. Those units are not sustainable. There are other 46% are funded through IRS contracts, where there is a government subsidy which ensures that OCHT gets 100% of market rentals, and the tenants only pay 25% of their income. Those tenants are in a much better off position, and overall, that 46% means that we can get a financially sustainable portfolio. What we need to be keeping on working on is trying to get the better outcome for the tenants, which is more of them on the IRS, which would put more funds into the system and allow for working that through. So we're working on some various ideas around that, and we'll continue to do that, but that's a fairly significant change which needs central government to be the leader on that. In the meantime, we're looking more at what are the things that we can do to develop and increase the number of units and grow the number of units to meet that shortfall on the waiting list. The Trust has recently written to the Mayor on that, and and we received that last week, and I'm looking at providing advice through to Council shortly on that matter.
Thanks so much. That's really comprehensive. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Andrew's questions, and I don't expect you to have the answer on the top of your head, but do you know if with the services the average price per unit that was settled on?
No,
that's fine. But it'd be good if we can get that. But also,
we need to dig back into the 2012 settlement on that. Yeah.
Okay. The other one. Did we have insurance? Obviously, this is outside the EQC, but insurance on the driveways and other hard surfaces.
Again, I don't know the answer to that off the top of the head. We'd have to take that on notice, Councillor.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any further questions on the report? No. In that case, I would just like to say thank you for coming in, and thank you for Kate and your team at OCHT. It's been a pleasure this term to watch progress and to come to several groundbreakings and then openings. I know that there's sometimes a concern that we, cluster social housing in some areas, and that's not the case with the work that OCHT is doing. And I note that the openings that we've been to this term have been in Brome Street in Sydenham, the 90 homes, Te Waiwaka Lane in St Martin's, Register Well Place in New Brighton, Gowerton Place in Richmond, Coles Place in St Albans, and I think they've all been excellent outcomes for the community, and I look forward to the next ones. So thank you very much. Do I have a movement of the report? Councillor Davidson and Councillor Turner to second. Deputy Mayor Turner sitting there over there. All those in favour? Any against?
Aye.
I declare that carried. Thank you very much. Okay, now we move to the Otatahi Christchurch District Greenhouse Gas Emissions Tracker. So we have Kevin here to talk about that.
Can I just check are you planning to have a break?
I was about to finish my sentence and say, and after this one, we will have a short break. So welcome, and thank you for the work you've been doing on this. It's good to get councillors across it properly and give it some visibility.
Thank you. So, and just to update you, this has been a collaboration of a number of teams across council and using expertise to develop this tool. So it's been a very collaborative effort with council staff. So I'll be demonstrating the District Greenhouse Gas Emission Tracker. So it very much allows people to see how the district is tracking across different emission sources, as well as displaying general transport trends. And the tracker's been developed in response to the resolutions made at the 12th of September 2019 Council meeting. So up here, if we start looking at the home page of the tracker, it's got information about the district's greenhouse gas emissions. On the right-hand side there, you can see just some high-level information, and that's from our 2016-17 inventory report for the district. So it just gives a bit of a snapshot of that, but that's our baseline, as you know, on our targets to reduce emissions. So a little bit of information there for those who go to the homepage. If we come down a little bit, the tracker is very much representative of what's currently available with data from electricity and petrol and diesel use that we can get monthly. So it's the data we can get monthly that's available, and that represents about 52.6% of our gross emissions from the district based on that report done back in 2016-17. So it's a significant amount of our emissions. There's a number of emissions that we can't get monthly data on, and we'll continue to look at options there. But this is a big amount of those emissions that we can track. So along the bottom here, it's got some buttons. And just reminding, this is a tool as part of the bigger program of climate change. So you've got the Climate Action Hub. This is within that particular information. So it's a tool to track information for people to have a look at. So if we go along here, the two first ones here, the transport emissions and stationary energy, that's where we actually work out the emissions. So if we go into transport emissions, we're tracking monthly data there. You can see there's some reasons for that, why it went down there. You can guess what that is, or know what that is, but we're tracking it monthly. So that's petrol and diesel for the district use. So, and it's broken down into on-road petrol and diesel use, as well as off-road. And off-road's the sort of movement of machinery and vehicles off-road, like from agriculture, construction and industry. So you see the monthly overall petrol and diesel use there relating to emissions, tonnes of emissions on the left-hand side there. And then you get a breakdown here for that month of on-road, off-road, diesel and petrol use. So that's just clicked on the March data. You can go to the April late when it arrives, but also February and back. So that's petrol and diesel transport use, mobile. And then if we go to stationary energy, and stationary energy is a term used for energy used from electricity and from diesel or petrol and boilers or generators. And as you know, electricity at the moment, it includes gas and coal use as well as hydro, but the emissions come from gas and coal and geothermal energy. There's a bit of emissions comes from that as well. So that's all worked together. The information comes in from Orion for kilowatt hours use monthly, and we also work out the petrol and diesel stationary use. And again, you get the tonnes of carbon emissions equivalent coming along here. And that's, as you know, cyclic if it's winter or summer, up and down. And there's a little breakdown there. But then we move on to transport trends. So you can see, click on that, there's month by month how we're going with patronage on the buses. It's tracking that. Go to cycling. This is based on 9 counters since July 2016, how we're going with cycle numbers and counting there. April was just a little hitch on that one. It's all of a sudden gone down, so that'll get fixed today. But you can see how it's tracking. What we want to do, there's probably about 20 counters out there, so transport team can add that in time when we've got enough information of that. Pure electric registration. So that's battery electric vehicles, how we're going in Christchurch in the district with registration. So it's tracking that. Hard to see with that little side. I'm just going to come along a little bit. There's another one there. Just wondering if our experts up there could click on it for me. Thank you very much. That's transport. If we just go along to traffic volume. I'll just click on that. Excellent, thank you. So that's quite interesting information. So Transport have got a number of sensors, you're probably well aware, around the city. These sensors are based so many kilometres from the CBD, and it can measure the traffic volume coming from the north, west, east and south. And it's broken down. There's the total amount of traffic volume, but then it's broken down into north, east, west and south. So good competition in there over time. How's each sort of area doing and coming into CBD? But good for evidence base as well, information, as well as those other tabs that I've just clicked on. So it helps us with decisions, tracking how we're going with emissions for decisions here and potential policy, but also for people out there to see how we're tracking against our targets on a monthly basis, really. So that was a quick update.
Thanks so much, Kevin. First question from me. I'm just wondering, as this develops, will there be sort of comparisons to previous years developed as we, as it goes on from here? That's kind of the baseline here.
Absolutely. So we have discussions around that and how we can demonstrate that too on a site, because you can look at this on your phone or you can look at it on your computer or a big screen out there as a plan too. So yes, stage 2. We can look at that, but also other things we can monitor with trends.
Yeah. And the electric vehicle one, while you're measuring the new registrations,
yes.
Was there a total registrations on there as well? Because that would be useful to have.
No, very good point, and that's what we need to develop in stage 2, so you can actually see total alongside that.
Yeah, total would be great. Okay, Pauline, then Yanni, then Andrew.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Kevin. This is great stuff. Just a question about the on the homepage of the smart thing, the agricultural emissions. If you could just explain that to me a wee bit better. So this is for the district, so it's not out in the rural sector. So we've obviously got some agriculture in the district, and you're saying it's likely to be overestimated because of the way Statistics New Zealand estimates stock numbers. Can you please just explain that a wee bit?
Sure. So when we do the inventory, the work done there, it's based on available data and statistics data when we get a consultant to do that with us. So the way New Zealand Statistics measures the number of sheep and cattle in the Christchurch district isn't seem to be a practical number. So what we need to do is find out through New Zealand Statistics or others in the future, when we do an inventory, to try and get a better figure for that. So New Zealand Statistics figures were used, but they don't relate to Christchurch district very well when we look at that. So that's why we put the rider up there in regards to that particular figure is probably reasonably lower than that. It's something we'll have a look at. But the data we've got available, the consultant who did this back then, is based on NZ stats. That's all we've got at the moment. So it's been in discussion with the agricultural sector, rightly so, with NZ stats on how that could be better done.
So do you have to wait for the next census, or?
Yeah, it'll be next time we look at, the potential where we're heading, roadmap, etc. We'll be including experts about how we could get a better figure on that, because that's too high.
Thank you.
A follow-up on that before we move to Yanni. Does that mean that with that 15.4% for agriculture likely to be lower, that the other numbers are likely to be higher?
Yes.
Yeah.
So your transport goes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
right.
That's
okay,
what we suspect.
Yanni.
Thank you. And that's really cool. And I was just wondering how easy the technology that sits behind it could be used to, for example, with the wastewater air quality monitoring that we're doing, how could we use some of the technology to show clearly people what the results are around what we're measuring there? Because it just seems a really good way for people to be able to look at trends and information in a simple, friendly, easy to understand way.
No, that's a good point, and it's something I've talked with smart cities and maybe ECAN to look at it, because they obviously monitor the air. Obviously, this is focused on greenhouse gas emissions, but there could be a place.
Okay, cool. Can I maybe flag a resolution? I have put these questions in through the Office of the CE probably a few months ago. But
this particular report
it's
just a receiving information report on on a specific greenhouse.
Should I
gas
do a
tracker.
notice of motion or something, or what would be the best way to pursue it?
I don't think it needs a resolution.
Okay.
I think that there's enough staff in the room to be able to pick up on that.
I have put the questions through several times now, going over several months, that we've got smart cities and we've got a community struggling to understand the impact. And given what we've heard from the deputation this morning, it'd be really cool to see what could be done.
Okay, so Lynn's picked up on that, and that someone will get back to you on that, but it's not really a matter for this report. Andrew.
Thank you. 2 questions, if I can. Thanks for the report. Thanks for the work that sits behind it. This is great. Some of the statistics are current right up to date. Some are current to the end of March on the tables. One of those that I had a particular interest in is the bus patronage. And I'm guessing the reason that some are more current than others is because of the source of the information. So I guess just some further information around that. And the bus patronage since the half-price fares came in, do we know whether there's been an increase?
We've got March there. They came in on April, didn't they, I think? I'm trying to remember.
I think we have had information through, I think the media had asked and it was reported that they have increased, but I can't remember what the figure was. We could get that information.
Yeah.
Though. Yeah.
And my second question, so just to drill down into the first...
Andrew, hang on a sec, we do have an answer and it's over here.
So ECAN data after the first period was a 10% increase, and they were hoping for further increases following the decline of COVID and the uptake in bus patronage as people get back to work and school.
Okay.
So I think they're intending to release regular updates as we see the impact of the fare.
Okay, so signalling interest in that, that's great. My second question is on the agricultural emissions. And you recognise here that there's an issue with the methodology, and we're looking at new methods to measure these agricultural emissions. Where is that at, and when will it make a difference to the way that we report?
I think where it's at the moment is we're recognising that NZ stats data is probably not incorrect with numbers. So it is an ongoing discussion, but we're probably not doing an inventory for a few years yet because that's static. Our concentration has been on what can we do so people, including in here, staff, can monitor how we're tracking, like monthly. Because the district inventory, we did 2 of those, and it's really good as a snapshot, but it's historic and many years. I think we were heading in a lot of organisations are getting that more monthly type data or 6 monthly data. So it is something that will be followed up in the future, definitely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to move next to Jimmy, then Phil, then Aaron.
Okay, one question regarding, thank you for the presentation, very good. Regarding to traffic warrant, you particularly mentioned a moment separate 4 different area, but whether can be the further breakdown to each ward or not, or each community board or not. The traffic warrant.
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
So Jimmy, are you asking if some of the data can be broken down into?
Yeah. That's right. That's a particular the traffic warrant. The officer mentioned, or they have a north, west, the south, and the east.
Yes.
Whether it can break down or not.
Good question. It's very hard to get more granular data, and particularly monthly. One area we are looking at through Wakakatahi, NZTA, they're looking at maybe battery electric vehicles in areas, which will be quite interesting, I think, for the district.
Yeah, based on their registrations, yeah.
Yeah, so we can look at those sorts of things. So this is stage 1. We'll be looking at stage 2 and what potentially we can add to it.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Phil.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. This is a great report. This is very good. And once it gets up and going with history, it will only get better. I look at things like this and think there's a hell of a lot of work you guys are doing here. How much time, is there a lot of people that are kept busy supplying this stuff every month? Or just give me a wee breakdown on that. And I heard you the word consultants. Are we farming much of it out, or are we doing most of it in-house, please?
No, two very good questions. No, we're not farming it out. This is what I've been very happy about in regards to this project. It's used the expertise within council and staff where we've met. And the process here is to automate it with current available information. So there's no one plugging in lots of data here. It's getting the information from what we have here and within council and external providers. So no consultants involved in this one, staff expertise to develop it. And now it's developed into a system we can add to it.
I think where the consultants came in, Phil, is that we used to get consultants to do the big sort of retrospective citywide emissions thing, and that was quite expensive and time consuming, and we're not doing that now.
No, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One is, can you go back to the bus data?
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a follow-on from Andrew's, but just looking at that, that has got April last year, which is 50,000 higher than April this year, looking at that data. So,
March.
Your COVID's been around 2 years.
We don't have April this year.
But but I mean, because you got to look at month by month, but also annually as well. We must have goals. And with the bus one, because there's a magic number if we're inspiring people to get on the bus, that you need a percentage of people on the bus for the carbon footprint of the bus to be lower than people using private transport. And it would be good to have that number in there so people use it as a target to go, oh, if we get that many people on, it'll be how many? Well, it depends on which numbers you look at. 6.8 was the most common I've seen. But let's say it's 5 or 6 or 3. But it'll be good to have that number, and then how many kilometres the buses are doing that do cover that.
I think with the tracker, it's reasonably high level for the public to see, so we can track it. What we'll be doing is in behind that is getting those yearly figures, and so we've got evidence-based data in behind it. It's that balance to make it simple on a phone and screen for both the public and ourselves. But we've got data in behind that.
And then on your electricity one, can you go back to that? Because I've always had a beef with the way we measure our electricity, and there's a contradiction that across the road we've got Christchurch NZ selling us as a business destination. One of the sale points in a modern green economy is our energy's renewable. Well, it's hydro mainly in the South Island, and the majority of New Zealand's electricity is hydro from the South Island, and we're only 20% of the population. So almost, because I've never seen any evidence to say that we get much electricity ever from the North Island that's made by the coal and the other dirty forms of electricity. So it's a little misleading, because I think we're in a lot better shape down here for the electricity, but I know because who we buy off and they produce somewhere else, that we kind of get tarred with their brush. But that's...
Yeah, the way we, following the standard to measure our emissions in the South Island and North Island, we've got to use the One New Zealand emission factor for electricity and transmission factor. So the rules are, if we want to call it that, for any organisation looking at our emissions from electricity, we use the One New Zealand factor. So if we have... if we're more hydro than the North Island, that's good. But we've got to use the one emission factor at the moment, and we do actually at times we take electricity from the north with gas and coal.
Yeah,
peaking.
Can we get those stats? Because on the MB numbers, it would be very surprising if the electricity was ever coming the other way. But I've heard that it does. But it'd be good to know. Is it 3 hours a year? Is it 30 days a year? I mean, I've got no idea. And how many kilowatts come across at the time? Because it wouldn't come much past Blenheim.
It'd be interesting to know. But also, I think you need to note that just because a source like sun or water might be renewable doesn't mean that it's zero emission. And there are emissions in the process of
looking after the lines network, the whole thing. Yeah, absolutely.
So there is still some emissions. Yanni.
Just was one other question I wanted to ask. And again, really appreciate the different categories. Are we able to measure the aviation emissions that come into the city? Because that's obviously something that's very topical, and I mean, we must be able to get the data. Appreciate it's not within the airport's scope to record those, but
They do.
I mean,
Yeah, they do.
yeah, it's scope 3. It's outside the
But they do measure it.
thing, but they measure it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, they measure it, but they're not responsible for it.
Kerosene for flights is one of the difficult ones, like to get the monthly data. It's quite problematic at the moment. But there's stage 2. There might be a transport trend we might be able to measure. Is the discussions with flights. So we'll just see what's practical. So as rather than the emission side, if we can't get aviation kerosene easily, then there might be some other measures that's suitable to track transport trends. Like we're tracking buses, bikes, electric vehicles. There might be an opportunity to look at flights, for instance.
Right. But if the airport's tracking that data, could it not just be put in, or?
Well, that's what we can have a discussion.
Yeah, okay.
with.
I think that would be cool if we could. Yeah, thanks.
Got Phil then Aaron. Can't hear you, Phil.
Sorry, I had my hand up from. Sorry, Sarah.
So that's all good. Okay, Aaron.
Yeah, so another stat that would be handy to have, especially the transport emissions being the highest, is productive emissions versus recreational or non-productive emissions, like people just driving around, people, a holiday you could call half productive, but someone making food or transporting medicine or whatever is quite a productive emission versus someone going for a joyride or doing burnouts in a paddock on dirt bikes for all afternoon. They must have a different value. Can we measure that? Because if we're pushing behaviour change, they'd be the emissions you'd give up first, I would have thought. Versus, transporting medicine's quite an important one. An ambulance emission would be an important one, a fire truck.
I think based on the inventory that was done, 36% of our emissions are from on-road, off-road petrol and diesel use.
Yep.
So at that level, there's lots of opportunities to be aware of how we can reduce those emissions. This is a tool. I think this is to help us with the evidence base, and also transport have a specific modelling tool to look at how you can adjust different activities with transport and what's the impact on emissions, which is very valuable for policy use as well. So this is very much a high-level people type tool to see how we're tracking, but there's other databases that can be used for evidence. I haven't heard of that measurement before, how you could break it down into that level, productive and whatnot. But I think there's, as you know, with the government's announcements and their plan, coming back to your earlier question, there's a target by 2030 to be 100% renewable energy. So there's a few targets in there, and there's a few plans in there, and we'll have our own plans in time. So, but winding back, I'm unaware of that sort of measurement.
Yeah. Because I think it would be handy. So this is a behaviour change tool, mainly, isn't it? Because it has things like get on the bus, we like to bike, leave your car in the garage. Mm-hmm. So that's its purpose.
This tool's very much to have the data there, so anybody can see how we're tracking with emissions, like in the transport and stationary energy area, over 50% of our emissions. So how are we tracking? Are we going up and going down monthly, let alone we need to do that yearly, like it was mentioned? And then how's the transporting trends going alongside that? So our hard targets get the emissions down by half by 2030 for the district. So how are we doing with two key areas of emissions? So that's the focus of the tool.
And then just finally, sorry Sarah, we had a really good presentation this morning on the food waste and the amount of environmental damage that does. It'll be quite good to have those measures in there, so as people are collectively being more responsible about that, we see that that's coming down as well, because that's methane and stuff. It'll be handy to see that when people are doing good stuff, that as a city, that it's working.
Good point. And one of the stage 2 or stage 3 areas might be having because waste relates to CO2 emissions. What can we track there as a district, practically, monthly?
Thank you.
Mel?
For electric vehicles and their energy emissions with electricity, that would be recorded under the stationary energy emissions, would it?
Yes, that's correct.
So we'd expect, I guess, to see that be increasing as the other one decreases. If, as the electric vehicles increase.
Yes, you expect it, exactly.
What would be interesting is to actually see the emissions per, like for buses, for instance, the emissions per person on the bus as the bus fleet turns into electric versus being petrol or diesel driven. That kind of information, is that kind of, would that be possible?
In regards to emissions per bus?
So you would expect that as the number of buses that are electric increases, that the emissions per passenger would decrease, especially if we get more people onto the buses. So it would be interesting to be able to track that kind of, it's more detailed, but...
Yeah, no, that's very good question. I suppose it's the balance, because it's how we track it on this tool. So it's easy on the phone and on the screen, I suppose. So there's good measures like that could be done, but it might be off this tool. It might be somewhere else
I think,
for policy.
I think one of the things that we should do is, if people have ideas of things, information that they'd like included, things that they'd like to get staff to look at for maybe stage 2 or stage 3, other bits of information. Even, on the bus one, it might just mention that, in the blurb at the top, it could start by mentioning that ECAN are gradually also transitioning their buses to electric, and currently they have 10% of the fleet, or just something as simple as that as we start, and get more accurate over time. But if people could feed those through to you via the Office of the CE, like normal, then I think that would be really useful.
It would be very helpful. And also just a reminder, with the Climate Action Hub that our comms team are doing, where we couldn't put this on there, and it's good data like that, it could be links to that data source, maybe.
That's a really good idea.
But yes, please, that would be great, any of these ideas.
So I think we will bring that one to a close now. Thank you so much, Kevin. I know you've put a huge amount into this. It's not easy, and but it's so valuable. Do I have a mover for this? Mel and Pauline. Any debate?
Sorry, can I just move that we add a note around the request around aviation emissions?
Well, no, we're just going to feed those through. I mean, there's a range of things, and Kevin said that it's
cool. So it'll be recorded in the minutes.
Yeah, I just like to just reiterate the thanks and just say it's really important. This has taken a while to put together, but it's something that we've asked for when we first set our targets, because you can't just set targets and then not track and see how you're going. And so having a useful set of indicators rather than just a simple, overall tonnage, if you like, means that we can really track how we're going in a key number of areas. And it's often said that you value what you measure, not the other way around. And now that we are measuring and making that public, it's going to make it much easier for us to have that conversation with our community about how we're tracking. Phil, is your hand up for debate?
Yes, please. I just chit-chat here. Thanks, Sarah. I agree with you. One of the things is that the price of petrol and diesel's gone through the roof, and there's nothing more of an incentive for people to change the way they power their vehicles than cost. I think because I'm hydrogen biased, that there is a hydrogen force coming through, and I did some working out the other day, and almost the worst thing around our city is the little, not so little, the delivery trucks dropping off the milk or the pies or the shoes or whatever, it doesn't matter, because they're 14 times worse than a car. So if we can get, now that we've got the tracker and we can look at this, we can see as hydrogen comes in, it's going to be a wee while, but at least we've got a starting point to see, and we can gauge what's happening.
That's great. Thank you for that. Anyone else? No, in that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? No, I declare that carried. And now we will move to a 15-minute break. So make that 11:35. We'll be back here. So, welcome back. Don't think we've got quite everyone, but we've got enough to be going on with. Okay, so we're now... Okay, so moving to the South Library Te Kete Wainanga o Waimokihi, earthquake repair options. So, welcome. I know that councillors have had quite a lot of information on this already, including a very long slide presentation, and staff now do have, I'm told, a few slides to make sure that it's remind people here and also make it clear for the community as well. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Just how do we make the slides go? There we go. Councillors, we have had quite an extensive briefing on this, and we've also briefed the community board, and there's quite an extensive report here that I'll take it as read. There's a lot of information in there. First thing I want to do, though, is acknowledge some comments from some of the councillors about this basically coming as a shock to some of the community, and why didn't we tell them this was coming. And I'll take that one on the chin. We were preparing this technical report, so we knew which option to go to the community with, but we learn from these things. Just a quick recap. We've put up there the outline of the current building as it sits down at Beckenham there. Just a reminder that it was damaged in the earthquake and was assessed at the time at 10% of NBS, and with that extra temporary bracing is brought up to 34%, which is the minimum. As well as the structural issues with the building, there are issues with the sewer and the heating and ventilating system down there. And what we're asking today is not for additional funding, which we have highlighted in the report. Long term will be required, but it's to get a clear direction as to, do we go with a rebuild, which is our recommendation, rather than a repair, because of the extensive nature of the repairs. So with me today, I've got Lynn Armitage, who's the project manager, and Helen Trappett, our structural engineer from Lewis Bradford, and got a big contingent from libraries and facilities and legal here as well, if you've got questions. And I know we have, I think we have our QS
on the line,
and also someone from our PMOs. So so we'll take it as read, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
That's great. Tim and then Aaron.
Just a couple of quick ones. When we say rebuild, we're talking about the same footprint or thereabouts, because it is on a hail site. Is that correct?
Absolutely, and that also means if we can use the same footprint, we can go over the top of the existing slab and avoid having to cart all that concrete away.
And just to clarify, the costings in the report are indicative, because once we've consulted with the community and the communities that use it, the different groups, and the staff as well, including David Sutherland and his crew at the cafe, which is a really important part of that building, we will be able to have a firmer or a better idea of the cost, which we would then take to either the 2023-24 annual plan or an adjustment to the long-term plan then. Is that correct?
That's correct. And what we hope to get from those workshops with staff, public, elected members, is a really clear indication of what they like about the building and what works well, and also what doesn't work well. There's a few things, a few funnies down there that don't quite gel. So that's the next step, and that's really going to help us define the future brief as to what we're looking at.
And final question is that, so following this decision, that is when we will be able, through the community board, myself and my colleague Mel, is to go and then ask the community and bring them in for what they see in the building.
That's correct.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks. Aaron and then Mel.
Yeah, thank you for the report and all the various options and things. And this photo there helps with my question. Why did a building built in 2003 perform so badly? Because I look at that aerial shot and nearly everything around it survived all of those earthquakes, including some buildings that are 50, 80 years old. or older, more than 100, and this one is needing a very expensive rebuild.
So with hindsight, it's easy to pick holes in people's designs, but if we look at it clinically with everything we've learnt in the last decade, the original design had a number of deficiencies. One would be the foundations. So the foundation system didn't perform well, and there's other buildings of the same vintage also close to a river that perform much better when they had specific detailing put in to accommodate liquefaction effects. So, speaking from personal experience, in the decade of the 2000s, we were aware of liquefaction as a thing that might happen, and we would get a geotechnical report and we would design foundations to accommodate that sort of movement. So the foundation has performed poorly. It's settled between 350 and 450 mils, approximately, with a 90 millimetre differential across the floor, which you can feel now walking around the building. So the second major deficiency is really the lateral system of the building, with it being portal frames that are very weak, and that's the limiting factor on the percent MBS rating when we look at the damaged building. It's a combination of earthquake damage, but also deficiencies of that original design.
I just follow up, did it meet standards at the time when it was built?
That's difficult for me to say now. We haven't done a forensic exercise to really assess every single thing. And what actually happened in the earthquake was you got a lot of benefit from secondary elements such as jib linings and the fit out that actually provided the stiffness to resist the earthquake loads. So I wouldn't be willing to put a number on, did it meet the code of the day? To give you a bit of an idea, the code today compared to the code in 2002 has gone up about 40%. Yeah. So if you designed a building right to the limit of the NZS 4203, it would now be deemed 60% MBS.
Okay.
So
good to know.
So it's difficult to put numbers on it, but you've got a combination of earthquake damage, but also deficiencies in the design.
And to pick up on a point that Councillor Kewen's made previously, we quite often design to minimum standards on things, especially with accessibility, and there's such a range of things that could have happened here, so it's an opportunity here to actually get it right and design as we should.
So then the question that would probably be going through a lot of people in the public's mind is there any comeback on the designers that designed a building that only lasted 5 years?
Unfortunately, it was a City Solutions structural design, so in-house City Council design, as I understand it.
Yeah, and there's been no forensic work done on it either at this stage.
Yeah. Oh well, the cost will go back on them then, and then the other question is because a lot of people who go visit it say it seems fine, happy to use it. And I know you've explained some of the mechanics of the building around the eco and stuff need changing anyway. Why not just do that and sweat the asset for its longest feasible life when we're so restrained and prices are so high? Why would we not do that?
Well, I guess it again might be a structural thing. I mean, you're asking someone to put their name on it to say this building's going to be okay.
Yeah. So the bracing that's been installed was definitely installed as a temporary measure. So there's still an earthquake-prone building notice on the front door. Lynn's got a copy of it there, which states that the building is only it's between 0 to 20% without the bracing, and then with the bracing installed, that's the red frames to the outside. Yep. It nudges it up to 34%. So I wouldn't be happy as a PCBU being responsible for that facility to say, well, actually, let's just leave it for another 10 years, making it closer to 20 years.
just so you know, half our hospitals have those right through them, next to every elevator and doorway.
That doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
No, doesn't make it right, but there's a limit to the public purse. So, okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's not going to get any cheaper to fix. So there's another whole debate of why don't we go for a lesser degree of strengthening as an interim measure, or as a the problem is the structural part of the project's only a small part of the project. So if we look purely just at the structural part of it, there still needs to be quite a lot done to those steel frames to get them up to 50% or 67% of code, because they are only the 150 millimetre UC section, so that's an I section, it's only 150, so it's sort of half the size it needs to be.
And if you look at the slide up there, if you might remember from the presentation about, so basically that's what you're going to be left with. To correct the floor slab, all that stuff's going to have to come off anyway.
Right. Melanie, you had questions?
Yeah, I've got three. First one is, if we decide to do the rebuild, will that new building, well, it says it in here, but just to get that aired, it'll be at 100% MBS, it'll be fully insurable, and it would be far more sustainable than the current building?
Absolutely, that's the big benefits of that option, having a clean slate to be able to, importantly, address any mechanical ventilation issues and architectural issues with insulation to all the different facades.
Second question, if the Alpine fault were to go, what do you think would happen to that building in that event?
Now, again, tricky question and a good question. So what I can tell you is that if you're sitting at 34% IL3 code today, if you're interested, that's equivalent to about 40-something% IL2, which is a lesser importance level, which can sometimes be argued for building like this. So you're sitting in that band of a grade C building, which is between 5 and 10 times the risk of an equivalent new building. So although we don't identify any immediate life safety hazards, it's still a factor more risky being in this building than an equivalent new building. And it's not a linear relationship, so it's quite a tricky thing to get your head around in terms of the risk. But my advice as a structural engineer is that it's not a good idea to have a facility that's got a childcare centre and many members of the public in it that's sitting on that threshold without planning to do something about it.
And lastly, would you, Lynn and Helen and the rest of the team, be prepared to give a public briefing, because that's what people have asked for, to give them the information that we've had and potentially to answer questions? I don't know, you can work that out how that would work, but would you be happy to do that?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Great. Yanni, then Sam.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to check if, does it have any brittle collapse mechanisms in it?
So the highest risk items are the heavy items. So that's concrete panels internally, but also that south wall. The south wall is currently propped up, so that's okay. That's all good. And the internal walls, they also have other mechanisms helping them, such as the fit out, the lightweight walls. So we haven't put exact numbers on anything, but I'm comfortable enough that it doesn't have an immediate hazard as a brittle collapse.
Right.
Yeah, it's
because I'm just mindful, like in the past when we've looked at our policy, we've seen that the MBS is a fairly blunt mechanism for judging the risk, and so we've got wooden buildings, for example, that are well below MBS that are probably quite safe. Mm-hmm. It's just how it's calculated. Mm-hmm. So what would, just trying to understand, what would be the cost of bringing it further up to code or raising the MBS? I wasn't quite sure from the previous answer. So keeping it going as it is, given what we've heard with the, stadium, obviously with the cost of construction at the moment, what are the options around how much we'd need to spend to get it to a level where you'd feel comfortable that it continued operation?
So that sort of assessment hasn't been done. It is something that we could look at. And I would estimate that it wouldn't be too onerous to put in additional bracing,
right,
whether that be plywood braced walls or extra struts or extra ties up and above the ceiling level to mitigate further the risk of the heavier elements causing trouble.
But I think you just have to still bear in mind that that won't fix the slab that's got a...
Absolutely.
got
That's just
wonky. Yeah.
That's purely looking at life safety.
Yeah.
So that's not considering insurance or long-term resilience or it's just.
But we've had the insurance claim anyway, so we're not going to get
This is for
more
reinsuring,
insurance, I
though.
presume. We haven't fixed it, so if we have another event, would we be able to claim for this as well, given that we haven't fixed it?
No, you'd be self-insured.
No.
Would any comment on that, Elizabeth? If we had another event?
If you have an event,
Sorry, you'll need to come to the microphones, people online.
Go on, hobble up here.
If you have an event, sorry, dodgy foot, in a building that has already been earthquake compromised, I mean, most of us will remember this from our own houses. If it's been earthquake compromised, there are carve-outs in the form of insurance that you can currently carry on that building. There could be, there'll be insurance carve-outs on it to date. There would be insurance carve-outs going forward. It's the same position that so many homeowners have found themselves in. It's not as easily and readily fully insurable as if you start again from scratch, because it is a compromised building. Is that?
Thanks.
Right, so effectively, if we temporarily propped it up,
Yeah.
I mean, or we, that's not going to change our insurance position one way or another. But at the moment, the rationale for rebuilding it is because we're worried about getting insurance cover on it. It's actually not. It's neither here nor there in terms of the case.
That's not the entire rationale. That's one of the points that we've raised.
No, that's what I mean.
It's one factor. So the insurance cover we've got now is the insurance cover we've got now, and
Right.
unless it was dependent on, and you must do something about this within X number of years, and I wouldn't know the position on that. But the insurance cover on a repair or a remediation would, I think, be likely to be less than that on a new build. So it's not the same. I think without having Adrian here or our insurer here, I don't imagine that it would be to the same extent, because you are insuring a building that was damaged and you're simply remediating a damaged building.
Right.
So that would be taken into account by the insurer
Okay.
when they're looking at exemptions and exclusions and so on within the insurance cover.
Yeah, and I was just wondering why we were bringing forward the funding in the draft annual plan, but not telling people that, but in the consultation document.
Well, I don't know whether Paul Dadson's online or not, but
Steve, are you online, Paul?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. I guess I was just trying to understand why we don't have one budget process that addresses the shortfall in funding and the timing, rather than what we're doing in this year's draft annual plan, which is to bring forward $4 million to do it sooner.
Can you comment on that, Paul?
Well, at the moment, we've got only 200,000 sitting in FY23, and we had $8.5 million sitting in 24, which we've proposed to push out into 25.
Right. So the funding hasn't been brought forward.
It's been pushed out.
So I'm just reading from the CPMS sheet, and the changes that I'm looking at is that proposed annual plan 23-24, we're adding $4 million to that financial year, taking it from 24-25 and 25-26. So in this proposed annual plan, we are adding 4.12000 to the budget. But it's also recognising requires improvement funding above budgeted insurance amount, which is the rationale. But what I don't understand is why, given that we're going to consult on it next year, why it wouldn't just be done at the same time.
I'll butt in. You better correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but the reason we've spread that funding out in the future is to reflect more accurately what the drawdown would be against a construction contract. So rather than leaving $8 million in 1 year, for example, and nothing in another year, that's not how a construction contract works. We've spread it out.
Oh, sorry. I'll just be really clear. I haven't been clear. It was currently spread out in our current LTP across 3 years. What we've effectively done in the proposed draft annual plan is to bring it forward and have a lump 8.4 in the 23-24 year.
Yep.
So it's a massive increase, and it's actually not spreading it out. It's actually bringing it forward as a lump.
So there's no extra funding. My understanding, Paul, there's no extra funding. It's just rephasing of it. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I mean, yes, that 8.4 in 24 at the moment is probably too high.
I'm just concerned because residents have come to us and made submissions around, wanting to understand what our changes are. And in our consultation document, we've called out projects that are less than this in the CD or the same quantum, but we haven't called this out. And so I just wonder how the community can have a say around how we're spending the money.
Well, it's only about how we're phasing the budget. It's not about how we're spending the money.
Yeah, it's still, the project is still in the LTP. It's the same amount of money at the moment. It's just been rephased slightly differently. And over the last few weeks, there's been more rephasing done as a result of some of the decisions and guidance given by council. So it's not out of the ordinary to do that type.
All right, just 1.42. I just wanted to check. You say the recommended resolution is that staff advance the design of the repair or rebuild to concept and validate the cost estimate before returning to council in Q1 2023 for a decision to progress the project. So then when I read the resolutions, it says to direct staff to progress the design of a rebuild. So I'm just trying to understand why the repair option is not going to be progressed.
That's the whole point of this report, is that we don't want to waste time and money going down an option that's council don't support. That's why we've given you a number of scenarios here. The preferred option is a rebuild for the reasons we've detailed in the report. That will save time and money.
I understand the reasons. I guess what I don't understand is why we're not going to, when we look at 1.5 in terms of gauging views and preferences of affected and interested persons, consultation we understand and we'll take all suggestions put forward into consideration. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, and I appreciate all the reasons why a rebuild makes more sense than a repair, but also why wouldn't we openly engage with our community around the different options like the repair, the rebuild, or the temporary structural propping, to give more life to the existing structure. Why would we be able to have that conversation through the next step of this process, or if not, why not?
Are you suggesting, councillor, that we go out and consult on options that aren't feasible?
It's absolutely feasible, isn't it? To temporary prop it for another few years.
It's not a waste of money.
It will waste a lot of time and money doing so if it's not feasible, but council would also then need to decide whether they wish to sweat the asset longer and have it at a lower NBS rating and take on that risk.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, can I just check on a couple of things? Firstly, if we waited until the next annual plan to consult on adding budget before we went into a consultation with the community over what the design would be, what would the delays to the project be?
Well, getting it to the concept stage, you've got you've got something that we've talked to the community about and a price at that point. There's nothing stopping you next year to say, right, we've got that, we've got some detail on this project now, could you put it in the drawer for another year? Or there's another number of options you can take February, March next year.
And have we had issues in the past where we've put a budget on and then gone to do some design work and then realised that actually what was wanted wouldn't fit in the budget? Sorry, you don't need to answer that.
No, I won't answer that one.
I was just going to say, I guess the point of starting on design, a concept design now, and engaging with the public on the basis that this is a replacement of the building.
Yeah, that's right.
Similar footprint, etc. So putting the constraints on lets us get a good feeling for whether or not we can meet all the requirements of the community and the stakeholders and the staff that use that building and what that cost would be. But if you don't set a budget, sometimes the sky can be the limit for the design.
Yeah,
if you know what I mean by that.
Absolutely. So Lynn's got some comments on the budget stuff here. And then we're moving to Phil for a question.
I had a question about 15 minutes ago.
Yeah, so Phil's been up there for a really long time too. Sorry, but you're right, your name is above Phil's. There's just someone else.
So I'll keep this very brief. Councillor Johansson, I think we need to sit down and just compare the data you're referring to, because on the full annual plan on the website, the first expenditure is scheduled for 23-24 at 8.4 million. So I'm going to suggest that we do a bit of a cross-check on the data on how the project is currently phased and perhaps resolve that.
You're absolutely right. That is what was in our draft annual plan. Mm-hmm. The point I'm making, though, is that this is a change to our LTP that has not been signalled to the community in the consultation document. So people, like when they make deputations to us today, you know, around Shirley or Phillipstown or other things that they think are important, aren't aware that these are budget changes that we're making. And I mean, we've often been told that, well, you know, the budget change in the draft annual plan is only for this year, but the reality is that these across multiple years of funding is being impacted. So, but you're absolutely right. The proposed annual plan is 8.4. The council's proposal in the draft annual plan is to bring forward the $4 million into 23-24. What I'm concerned about is the public have not got visibility of that and may not have been able to make submissions to that because it wasn't called out.
Okay, so Sam, then Phil. Sorry, Phil.
Yeah, just one question. So we talked about, I mean, I'm quite relaxed about it being rebuilt as opposed to repairing it. I think that will save money longer term. Just if we go through the design phase and we put it in the drawer like you talked about, how long can we put it in the drawer for? So is it the kind of thing that we can, how long can we sit?
Council consents last for 2 years as far as I'm aware, so we could...
So probably take a year to get it, so that gives you maybe 3 years.
But also, I mean, the only thing that may significantly change is if the code changed again.
Yeah. Look, that's what I'm getting to is if are we logically going to design it and then have it built in the next 2 or 3 years, or are we going to, so when we say we put it in the drawer, we're not going to design it and then push it to the end of the LTP, are we?
No. I mean, it was just it's something that has happened. I mean, we've had roading designs done, ready to go, and they have just to wait for funding. It's sorry.
Can I comment on
You can comment.
So he's lost the plot.
I just heard nothing.
So the design stage that we're talking about, coming back to see elected members in the first part of 2023, is a concept design only. Right? So it's a concept such that we've had input from the community and the users, we've developed a concept, we've verified a cost for that. That's what you would be putting in the drawer, not a fully detailed, fully consented thing that was ready to build. So through the next annual plan that we're talking about, 23-24, you would take that concept design and that estimate of cost and you would phase the money in the plan and you would consult on that through your annual plan /LTP
then
process.
And
design. Then you would do a detailed design and move towards construction when you knew you had approved funding available for that. Yep. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Phil.
Yeah, so Sam more or less asked what I asked. Brett, this is good. So just how long, I know we've sort of answered it, but how long for design, consent, consultation, how long on a good day with the tailwind would it be before you sat in front of us looking for the green button to say we need money and go? It'd have to be. Have to be.
Yeah, $64 million question, Phil. Once we have the concept, council can then decide as to whether they support it or not, and also decide as to whether it's going to be addressed in the annual plan or the next LTP. And from that point onwards, then that's when we hit the go button. But really, that's a discussion for February, March next year when we come back.
Yeah, so February, March next year, come back with the concept plan.
Yes.
Yeah, and then it goes out for consultation, and then you've got to get consent as well. So you could easily be the next year, couldn't you?
On current time frames, I think it would take quite a bit of time to get it through the next few phases.
I'll just jump in, Councillor Major. So if we can go through the annual plan process, there'll be a lot of things, obviously, that really start to move reasonably rapidly. So resource consent, building consent, the finalisation of the design, etc., and of course going to market for a contractor. So there's a lot of stuff that would need to run in parallel. And the earliest, according to my estimate at this time, that you could get for a construction start would be in the calendar year of 24.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. No, that's fantastic. That's and just to clarify in my head, at the moment we're just sneaking through with yes. Is that, if I got that right?
I didn't hear that.
Just sneaking through what? Sorry.
MBS.
With earthquakes.
Yeah. So the current rating is 34%. MBS at an importance level 3 with the temporary bracing in place. And if we were to, for argument's sake, consider the building an importance level 2 building, which is a normal building, it would be around 40-something%. So you're in that range of C-grade building.
Okay. Yeah. And one last question. If we're going to all the trouble of a concept design and that sort of thing, and I know the areas aren't the same size or shape, and listening to Joe Gould this morning, is it possible that this exactly the same plan could be used at Shirley Road, which would save a lot of design? Then when it all comes to us, it's all, the two of them are sitting in front of us and we just pick which one we do, or probably both with a bit of luck if we're lucky.
That's really a question for the libraries team, but there's always learnings from every project that can help us with the next one.
And I think the key to this is you've got two different communities there. We'll be going to the community to talk about what they like and what they don't like about this one. That may be a wee bit different for the Shirley community. They might want some changes which suit their needs. So I guess potentially yes, but it would require discussion with the community first.
All I'm getting at is to build the same plan. If you can do it, then do two separate designs. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. Understand. Yep. We could certainly take the design to them, but I mean, there's a lot of things to happen in the Shirley area and the discussions with 10 Shirley Road and that yet.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay, are there any further questions? If not, I think I have a mover and a seconder, Tim and Mel, for some resolutions that you've sent through. Yep. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so these are similar but a bit more detailed to the initial staff recommendations. Staff have had a chance to look through these.
Yes, happy with those, yes.
Happy with those, no concerns? No. Right, so you can speak last? Yeah, okay. So Councillor Spendra, it's moved, Councillor Coker seconded. Is there any debate? Yanni?
Sorry, can I just, Ed, can we get advice back on temporary strengthening to extend the life?
Point, temporary strengthening, is that because you would like that as a different option?
Yeah, well, both, because if it's going to we don't know what the budget outcome is going to be in a year's time, so we might decide to do that anyway because of the concerns that have been raised. Or we might find that that's something that the community wants. So it would be good to know that when we talk to the community. That's certainly the feedback I've had from people is they have asked, if what's wrong with the current building, if it could be extended, because they love the building. It's a great place.
We've got 157 pages explaining it, and we've said we could go and talk to the community.
So, Yanni, are you looking at moving an amendment to bring some extra information?
Well, an additional resolution, yes.
So that would be an amendment, unless councillors Scandrett and Coker. No. So you'd have to move an amendment and have a seconder.
All right.
But there is no reason why during the process if staff thought that was going to be useful, they couldn't just do it. But
okay, well, if they can just do it, that's fine. I'm happy for the staff just to do it.
This could be asked through the
a
consultation.
resolution, but I mean, they may not. They might, because we're going to give direction to do a rebuild.
We're going to,
in the meantime.
In the resolutions, it requests staff to hold a public briefing which is live streamed about the repair and build options to inform the affected community. So I would have thought that information would be really relevant for that.
I don't. Okay, so question for staff.
Sure.
In time for a community briefing, would you be able to get us some information? I mean, we've already had information through on the NBS and the structural stuff there. Would you be able to have information at that briefing on what it would mean just to do extra strengthening?
We haven't set a date for the briefing yet, have we?
Sure. It's because we are wanting a briefing quite quickly for the community. That's the whole point.
Yeah, it's quite a tricky thing because it depends what, Yanni, it depends what you're after. If you're after, let's look at a scheme for argument's sake to take it up to 2/3 full code, and you want that to stay in place for 10 years, then I'd need to know sort of what's the time frame. Are you happy keeping the red braces outside as well? Yeah. And is this a interim measure of, are we then going to have the same debate in a decade's time?
I would say, I mean, my suggestion would be 5 years, but
okay, so
at what NBS level?
So
well, what gives you the comfort? I mean, there's not a life risk, so it's not shut. If it was dangerous, it would be shut right now. We wouldn't let people in.
Okay, Yanni, I'm just going to draw a close to this particular conversation, because your
so I was just going to leave it to staff as basically
because your potential amendment and the information and what you're aiming to do would be quite different to directing staff to start a rebuild process. Then I think you should have that as a foreshadowed motion rather than an amendment.
I'm sure in the workshops with our citizens that we're going to get those questions, so we'll have to answer them in the workshops anyway.
And I'm happy for staff to determine what the right level of MBS would be for, say 5 years. I just give a time frame of 5 years, but I'm just mindful of what's happened with the stadium.
You can't say that. You can't just.
Hang on, Tim. The point of this report is to give staff direction on whether to proceed with a rebuild option or whether to do a repair, which would likely entail some extra strengthening and things like that. If you would like another option, Yanni, which is to just strengthen the building to make it last as long as possible before we look at those other options, then that will have to be a foreshadowed motion. Rather than
I'll foreshadow that. Yep.
Okay, thanks. Pauline.
A question about the wording in the resolution. Tim, you've moved it, haven't you?
Yeah.
So 2 seems to contradict 1 in my view. So I think 2 is asking to inform the public about this report. So it's not asking them whether we go for a repair or rebuild. It's you're wanting to workshop the report and explain to them why we are voting for 1.
Yeah.
So can you change that wording? Because it looks like you're having a briefing about repair and repair options. So it's really request you hold a briefing which is live streamed about this report. Yeah.
It could say about the repair and rebuild options considered in this report to inform the affected community.
Okay.
Contained in this report.
Yep.
So it's just
about the repair and build options discussed in this report in order to inform. Yeah. Otherwise, it looks like you're going out to ask them whether to repair it.
Happy with that?
Okay. Okay, and you don't need a foreshadowed motion of bringing information to enable a
Yeah, I can't hear you. Is that right? Is it me?
Sorry, someone turned that off. Yeah, so you've got a question?
Yeah, we've got to rebuild it. We're just throwing good money after bad. Like
Phil, is this debate or question?
It's a debate.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's not
I will start debate
Get
in
in
just a
line.
second. We just had some more clarifications. So,
sorry, I thought we'd...
Yeah, we're about to start the debate. Sorry, some other people had some extra questions.
Sorry.
That's all good, but your name's on the list. Okay, so we are got the debate. Tim wants to wind up at the end, so we've got... Okay, another question? Yep.
And it relates to treating Yanni's point as a foreshadowed further motion, because given that we have heard in answer to a previous question that once this work has been done, we could then ask, or a future councillor could ask for that to be put in a bottom drawer for some time. The answer to the question that Yanni's asking, or the information he's asking for, could actually inform whether that was viable or desirable and how long for. So I would suggest that Yanni's addition could be dealt with by way of amendment rather than foreshadowed motion, because it's additional to, not instead of, and actually could inform a decision that a future council might want to make once this information and associated costs land.
Okay, the mover and seconder are not happy having it included.
Yeah, but the question of whether there's an amendment on it, whether it's treated as an amendment or not, has got nothing to do with whether the...
Johansson has indicated that it would be instead of doing this work.
I wanted it as part of the
As
options.
well as,
that comes
was my
back to us.
understanding.
There's an option.
But you don't want it there, so...
So
Yeah, the next council will be getting briefings and updates and have a paper come to it on the concept design, and during that process may wish to ask for additional information.
So my understanding is you maybe wish to add a note that when we come back with the concept design and costings in Q1 2023, that we bring the information that Councillor Johansson was asking about as a comparator, so that you can make a decision to go forward.
I mean, I'd assume that kind of information would be in an options kind of report anyway, right?
We usually do, yes. We have to consider all options. So when we come back, we can have that as a comparator to say, here's the concept plan, here's the new costings on it, and by the way,
to go ahead because this
because
is
of
the
this, and if you don't wish to go ahead, we could sweat this for another 5 years, but these are the cost implications and the risk involved.
Yep.
So it is as well as, not instead of.
So it could be.
Thank you.
So unless you want to put it as a note or change.
Is it genuinely, Tim, no, but it's generally understood by staff that that would come back in the options.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. I'll just put it up there as a note to say that to include that information.
Yeah. So a noting provision.
That way, there'll be an action memo that will come from that, and staff will have
But
to
it's not
include
a
it.
resolution.
That's what I'm.
No. So process-wise, are we able to just have a note in the committee discussion kind of part that is not a resolution? Is that right? Okay. Are there any further questions before we move to debate? Yanni.
Ask that you put them, just put one separately. Thank you. 1A and 1B as well.
Okay. Okay, we'll move to debate then. Melanie. And then, no, you had a question. Melanie, then Phil.
People love South Library, and I think that's why we've heard a lot of feedback from the community over a short period of time, especially on social media. They want a local library, and they want their service centre. And it's not just local people that use it. We heard from Joanna earlier that she goes there sometimes, and she lives in Shirley, so or at least is in somewhere around there. So I think part of this process, so I think we'd probably agree that we should have informed the community before today. I think the process happened incredibly quickly from our initial briefing to making a decision. And I think putting that information forward to people to see why we're making the decision today that we are is a sensible one to make. It seems very, very clear to me. As we heard today from Helen, structural engineer, if we keep it at 34%, that's 5 to 10 times the risk to people's lives if there's some unfortunate incident like an alpine fault earthquake. So I'm personally not willing to risk that if we can move forward. I also would like to see that new build be at 100% NBS, and also for the new build to also be far more sustainable. There's many elements, and the staff can probably say this much better, of the current building that we have that don't work, and so it'd be good to make it fully operational when we have a new library and service centre. And where the discussions around funding, well, we're not at any point at the moment making any decisions actually around that, because it's going to come to annual plan or to future long-term plans. So that final budget will happen later. So at the moment we're just looking at the concept design, and we're going to involve the public in that so they can have their say in what the future of this new building looks like. So I think it's when we have the resolutions that we have today to make sure that people's voices are heard for a library that they love.
Thank you. Phil.
Yeah, well said, Mel. I agree with everything there. It was, way back in the day, it was designed with all the best intentions, and it was prior to the earthquake. Now we find that it's sunk to 300 to 400 millimetres, which is no surprise to me because it's so close to the river, and it's got a 90 millimetre slope on it. We're just throwing good money after bad. Even if we could repair it, from what I read, it's going to cost every bit as much, if not more, than repairing it, than rebuilding it. Sorry. So I'm totally in support of this to get a design for a rebuild underway as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yanni?
Thank you. Look, I understand that, there's some constraints, and I really am concerned, though, that, the transparency with our community over this process is really frustrating, because I think, what we learnt through the earthquake as we looked at our facilities is that just using an MBS as a standard to guide decision making doesn't always give you the best community outcome. In fact, there's so many nuances to how we assess things and how they're used that is important. I don't even really comprehend why this is an IL3 building, and I wonder what other facilities we've assessed as IL3 versus IL2 that are in a similar category. But the reality is that, first and foremost, this council has an issue with residents feeling like they can be engaged in our decision making and around transparency. And so I would have thought the best thing we could do is to put all the information on the table at an early stage of this process and enable the community to feed into the various options that are being put forward, rather than us make a decision today that jumps to a conclusion based on a report that we've received for a few weeks, based on a draft annual plan that has got budget movements that, again, we've heard today may not even actually be necessary. And probably most concerning is that in our current financial climate, with the cost of construction, and I don't think you need me right like today to point out what's happened this morning to all of you, that we're in a very serious situation with the cost of doing things, that we're looking at a massive quantum of money being necessary for a community facility that is relatively new in the context of things, and that there may be other options to extend its life. So I don't agree with directing staff to engage the process for a rebuild, to progress the design for a rebuild of South Library facility at this stage. I think the process is around the wrong way. I think this needs to happen after all the options are consulted on with the community to show what the cost is, and that should be done as part of the draft annual plan or the draft LTP. But I just implore councillors to be open-minded as to the best outcomes in the situation that we're in, so that people can actually feel like they've been involved and can have a say rather than leap to a conclusion. If the building was dangerous and if there was such a risk, then it would be closed. But it's not. It's open. People love it. It's a great facility and a lot of people really enjoy it. So I think, again, that's the sort of information that I think working through with the community would be important. So I'm happy to support some of the other things that are in here, but just under one, I won't be supporting that today. I'll be abstaining from that one because I don't believe the process is right.
Thank you. Pauline, then Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Look, this is a technical report that we've received, and it gives me enough information to actually agree with the report that a rebuild for this facility is the way to go. And the sooner that we do that, as we know in this climate, the better. If we were to delay one, we would delay the whole thing by at least a year. And we've had that information, and you requested that, Yanni, and you've got that. And for anyone to interpret this report negatively, I'm gobsmacked. I think this community is incredibly lucky. They're lucky that they managed to have the facility propped up for how many years, 10 or something. And now they're lucky that they've got a technical report that says this is the best way to go. Let's deal with this. There's other issues apart from safety. There's ageing infrastructure inside and all that, which will be dealt with, including cheaper operational after it's rebuilt. So, I think this is a positive report. We should be celebrating it and get on with it. So I encourage you to vote for one. Don't abstain and vote for it and get this thing happening. Community facilities are incredibly important. We know that. And we know how much people love this facility. So let's get it fixed. Let's get it working properly.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, just really briefly. I think Brent and the team have done a pretty good job here of getting this to a sensible solution. If you think about it, most of the time repairs far exceed the cost of rebuilding. But I think what the team have talked about today, which is really useful, particularly an independent engineer, is that, if we were to sweat this for another 10 years as the PCBU, that's possibly not the most prudent thing to do as a council. I note that we're all exempt from that as the PCBU, but our Chief Executive, Dawn, is the one that does end up in prison should something go wrong, and we haven't taken the necessary steps. But I think probably the thing that's been lost a wee bit in the debate is around what the team have said around developing the concept design. So what's going to happen, and just to be very clear for any public watching this, is they will now go away, develop a concept design with the community, taking into account Mel's amendments, work through that and come back to us. If at that point we decide we do not have any money on budget, and like everyone's alluded to, we have some challenges around our budgets today, we don't need to proceed with it straight away. So we're not hitting a go button on something that will end up in a drawer and won't be used. We're developing a concept with the community, at which point we decide to hit the detailed design phase will then allow us to go and work with them. So, yeah, to me, this is a really pragmatic solution, and I think it's the kind of thinking we need within the council to develop stuff to a point which we can line up with our budgets, but also acknowledging that, and we've seen it before more times than not, when we repair something as opposed to replacing it, we end up costing the ratepayers far more than we need to. So I'm fully supportive of what the team have put forward.
Thank you. Andrew.
Thank you. Building a new fit-for-purpose 100% of MBS building, after the community have been using a damaged building at 34% MBS propped up with those temporary structures for the last 11 years, in my view, is absolutely the right thing to do. And the report makes it clear why, and the answers to the questions that have been asked this morning make it even clearer. But I think it's important to realise that this is just one decision on the way to an outcome for this building. It's not the final decision, particularly given the decision that's going to be needed in the future to approve the required quantum of funding and the timing of that expenditure as well. But what we've got in front of us today is an opportunity to progress this project towards the right outcome. Now, just because a building isn't so dangerous that it needs to be closed isn't a reason to wait until it is so dangerous it needs to be closed before we do something about it. Just because a building is one that people love isn't a reason to leave it there. And there were plenty of buildings that people loved that had to be demolished after the earthquakes. So the concept of a damaged building needing to be demolished, regardless of how much people love it, is hardly a new thing in Christchurch. Thanks to Tim and Melanie for the resolution, including the additional wording that acknowledges the need to inform and further engage the community. My view on this today, it's an opportunity to get some progress rather than causing further delay. It's an opportunity to be decisive rather than indecisive, and it's just one step on what's going to be a far longer journey to the completion of this project, with some far bigger decisions around quantum and timing of funding still to be made by a future council.
Aaron?
Yeah, no surprises here. I agree with quite a few of Yanni's points around this, although I do like number 2 that's been put in there. As soon as Melanie suggested it, I agreed under my breath straight away, said that's a good idea, because they need to be taken on the journey. I struggle with us, because this is a public building, built with public money, and I just believe that this council for too long now has not sweated its assets enough. Some people would say we do, and we do too often. That has, I disagree. I've spent plenty of time in this building after the earthquakes. We were in there for 6 months. It was our main building. We were there 4 days a week, and it's a great facility. I was never at any point in any time that I've been there since ever thought that there was that bigger problems with this building. And like Yanni said, if it was that dangerous, it would be closed, and so would many others. But not every building will always be 100% of code, and not all are. And that will bring me to my point that whilst we live in a city that has many facilities that people spend 24 hours a day in, and I'll allude to things like mental health facilities and stuff, which are just so far beyond the standard that this building currently is, I think it's irresponsible to spend this sort of money on a building when we could at least have the option of seeing if we could sweat the asset. And I'd only want to do that if it was done safely. I don't want a life risk, but if it can be done safely, then I believe we should, and that should be the way forward. Because to be quite honest, this council's hemorrhaging money, and we had a really clear warning yesterday in our briefing, and I won't give out any of the details, but we had a clear warning that the more that governments and councils commit to spending, the more prices keep going up. The private sector started pulling back. Councils and governments have to do the same, because when you're all bidding on the same piece of steel and the same cubic metre of concrete, the price can only go one way. And so I believe it's irresponsible to launch into this now without at least having the option for the public of sweating the asset a little. Not making it uncomfortable for staff, and if there's a bit of fall from one side of the building to the other, welcome to a percentage of people's houses in the city. So let's just start to try and get a little more value out of something that, if it, as far as its life goes, has had somewhere between a fifth and an eighth of its expected life. It should have been there a lot longer than this, and there's a big carbon footprint to making a whole new building when we could get a lot more value out of this.
Unlike my colleague, I am really not keen for us to sweat this asset much longer. I think that while it's well and good taking your own risks of things that you choose in your own home with your own family, we have quite a different role as governors, where we're governors for public space and public realm, and that's quite a different one. And I think that comparing South Library to the terrible state of our mental health facilities just brings the two wrongs don't make a right phase to mind, and it beggars belief actually that the CDHB have allowed that asset to be sweated for so long.
It's government.
Yeah.
It's government. We've asked many times.
Yeah.
Just let's not mislead the public if we
Could you
can help
please
it.
not interrupt the debate? It is not just the MBS that we're dealing with today. It is a range of factors, and one of them is sustainability. I found myself agreeing with both the Deputy Mayor and Councillor McDonald at the same time, which is unusual, but heartening.
Tell me about it.
But the one thing I think that hasn't been mentioned in this is something that gets raised a lot when it comes to our buildings, and people often talk. Colleagues bring up the most sustainable building as one that already exists. That's not the case in this case, and this is the first time that we've had a full sustainability assessment done with the option of repair or rebuild for one of our council facilities. I wish we'd been able to do it much earlier for other facilities. I think that would have helped us enormously through this process. And I think that while the techniques and things, the tools weren't there's some lost opportunities in that space. So it was really good to see that done. It's really clear that both for a environmental sustainability, financial sustainability, and for public safety, that this is the right way to go. And now I'll turn to Tim to wrap up the debate.
Thank you very much. But not all surprises are bad, and it was a bit of a surprise when it came to us at the community board in such short notice. But as I said, not all surprises are bad, and it's a real shame that people think that this is. What it has actually highlighted is the community are now really focused on this. So when it goes out to the community through the community board, we will have higher engagement. So that's a real plus. We've already talked to staff. The community board and staff have agreed to have information at the entrance to the library and service centre. So that's going to be a real plus. They've agreed to live stream the briefing to the community board, and the community can come to that as well. So this has raised the feedback, etc., from the council, from the public, and it's all been positive. There is a concern about the loss of services during the fix, but I think it is better to have that planned in a temporary situation in the local area than turning up one day and having to close a building that is 34%, irrelevant whether it is IL3 or IL2, that's just pieces of paper. It is, if the building falls under 34%, we have to close it, and there is nothing there for that community. And when I say community, the community stretches from Sumner through to Hallsville, and we've heard earlier on, as far north as Shirley. It's a wide community. IL3, this is a building that was built to be a secondary to the council building in time of emergency and crisis. And over the last 10 years, we have had our share. We have had, I won't go into it, but it's right across the board. We've had everything. And we actually don't know when the next earthquake will happen, but we do know now that there will be one. We do not know when the Alpine Fault's going to happen, but we are told, we're given distances and times, etc., which mean nothing, because it could happen tomorrow, could happen in 500 years, but it will happen. So we need this venue as a secondary, a backup, and especially for the communities that use it. And when you go there and talk about communities, we talk about concept design and talking with these communities, there are a wide range of people that have nowhere else to go and sit on the computer to have an engagement of some sort, cut down their isolation from communities. We have the childhood learning centres, absolutely outstanding, where we have young people teaching old people how to use computers and other things. It's absolutely wonderful to see. And with consultation through the community board, with the community would know the groups. We know the residents' associations. We know the Apawaho Heathcote River Network. We know the Summit Road Society. We know the members of that and those that are important there. There are so many areas that this local community board and the local councillors who represent this area and these areas can help with when staff are making that connection. I just see positives here, and it's a real shame to see negatives, and it may be put in a drawer for some time, but at least with consultation with the community, we know what we're building, we know what is wanted by our community, we know a ballpark figure, a better ballpark figure of the costs that we'll be looking, and whether this is future annual plan or an adjustment to a long-term plan, that is to be decided in the future. I want to thank the councillors that have been supportive, and it's really good to hear. And it's all about community. It's not about anything else. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Turner? Yes. Councillor Chu?
Yes.
Councillor Coker?
Yes.
Councillor Cotter?
Yes.
Councillor Donovan?
Yes.
Councillor Davidson?
Yes.
Councillor Galloway?
Yes.
Councillor Johansson, I understand you're abstaining.
Yeah, so just wanted to support 1A and 1B, but abstain from 1. And I did ask that those could be broken out separately.
Oh, so sorry.
One is A and B are part of 1.
Yeah.
Which is quite different. You don't want to do it? Okay, I'll just abstain from all of it. But I support A and B. I just don't support number 1.
Okay.
Yeah, but the other two are about the design, so.
I'll just abstain. I'll just abstain from
Abstain
that
from 1. Okay.
Councillor Kewen. Councillor McDonald.
Yes.
Councillor Major.
Yes.
Councillor McClellan.
Aye.
Councillor Scandrett.
Yes.
Councillor Templeton.
Aye.
Okay, so that is 12 yeses, 1 no and 1 abstention. So that is carried.
Thank you. Do we need a division for the rest of it? No. Okay, can I put the rest of them, so 2 through 5. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? No, I declare that carried. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm aware that 1 o'clock is rapidly approaching. Thank you so much. That was really useful. So we've got the Sustainability Fund, Suburban Regeneration Report, Events and Festivals Fund, and Heritage Grant Extension in the next 20 odd minutes, but we may have to go into lunchtime a little bit to get through it all. So Tony. Thanks, Tony.
Well, kia ora koutou. So today we bring you a proposal that's for the Sustainability Fund, which is outside the normal funding round. And the reason for that is it's because it's a time-sensitive application. But the next funding round for the Sustainability Fund is planned for September, October to avoid overlaps with the Strengthening Communities Fund. But also then to allow the new council to agree to the projects early in the new year. So the decisions for the Sustainability Fund will be made February 2023. So that's partly the reason why we brought this to you now, because it's such a long time between the funding rounds. So this application was reviewed by our normal council process to assess the merits of the project against the outcomes or the terms of reference for the fund. And the staff determined that it's a priority 1 application, which again is another reason we brought it to you. Just a reminder that 18% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions relate to buildings and housing, and this is one of those projects that is responding to that, because of course the Sustainability Fund was developed to respond to, to support community and business initiatives to respond to climate change. So that's the basis of this. I'm understanding there's a question. I'm happy to answer those questions later, but if I maybe just quickly give a sense of what the project's trying to deliver, and then we can talk about any questions you may have. So this is a proposal from EcoBulb, who has been a partner for quite some time with it, over many years with the council. They helped us with the Earth Hour events. You might recall we were encouraging people to turn off their light bulbs, and EcoBulb gave free bulbs pretty much to residents in Christchurch at the bus interchange. We gave away thousands of light bulbs. At the time, LEDs were just coming onto the market, so it was trying to encourage people to use energy efficient light bulbs. So this proposal is to establish a service which has been running elsewhere in the country quite successfully. The services elsewhere have been funded by the Ministry for Business Employment Innovation, as well as an energy hardship fund that they've set up. So they've been running those in King Country, Northland and Ashburton. And basically the service it's a very targeted service, giving people support, free light bulbs, free low flow shower heads. Then they also clean heat pumps to make sure that they're running smoothly, and then they give people advice and support on how to change or how to look at their energy provider and make changes using the Power Switch program, which is a nationally available tool which allows people to assess the best energy provider that they have. So that is pretty much all it does. It focuses on really simple interventions that can be installed at that time. So they don't give people advice. There's a little bit of advice, but they mostly install things in the house. So they come to your home, talk to you about your needs, obviously, fill in a very simple template that just understands your energy use and the energy provider you're on, and then ask, of course, if you want LED light bulbs to be installed, and they go ahead and do that, and then they change the shower head if that's what the resident wants. And then they literally take the resident through the power switch approach so that the resident then can see exactly what energy provider they have and the savings that may be achieved from that. So I've just received a report from EcoBulb, in fact, yesterday, that in relation to the Ashburton model, that they've been delivering savings of $700 per household with that approach. So it's a very targeted service aimed at light bulbs and water, shower heads, and homes can obviously decide what they do beyond that. But it is not a whole of home assessment. It's not a very detailed assessment of all the different options. It's just targeting those things. So that's what this funding's to support as a pilot for Christchurch for 200 households, focused on energy hardship households. And the intention is to craft using this funding and the pilot, to craft an application to MBIE to deliver an expanded service in Christchurch, one that would service far more homes than the 200 pilot. So this is providing leverage. This funding would provide leverage for EcoBulb to go to MB to be able to secure a much greater level of funding. They're talking about maybe 10,000 homes being supported in Christchurch, that sort of scale of delivery. And the reason they can deliver that scale is because it's a very simple, targeted, light touch, not a complicated whole of house, detailed assessment. So that's the essence of the service we're talking about here.
Happy to move the.
Thanks, Phil. Do I have a seconder then to get up, Mike? So it's going to be Phil and Mike. Do we have any questions? Okay, so Anne, then Tim, then Yanni.
Thanks, Tony. And just can you help us to understand how this is different from what's already being offered by other agencies in the city?
Sure, thank you. So at first glance, it might appear that this is an overlap with existing services. And look, we're so lucky to have such great services in Christchurch. So two that are quite similar, you could think, would be Community Energy Action and Energy Mate. So if I just give you a quick understanding of what those services are and how this differs, then that would answer that question. But the way that our staff view this is that this is filling a gap in Christchurch, that we currently don't have something similar to this. So Community Energy Action do provide whole of home advice. It's fantastic. In fact, we've been supporting them ever since the earthquakes through Build Back Smarter and now Healthy Homes Canterbury. So their whole of home advice they provide then for the household looks at all the different aspects of home performance, and then they give for low income households some subsidies from the government, and those subsidies really relate to insulation and heat pumps, generally speaking. So that is a great level of service for the residents if they're after insulation and heat pumps, but it doesn't include light bulbs, and it doesn't include low flow shower heads, and it certainly doesn't go to understanding the energy provider that you may have, the power switch discussion. So in addition though, because it's such a large, complicated sort of advice service, it does take longer to go through that process, and so they're not hitting as many households. So they're reaching around 500 to 600 households a year, whereas the EcoBulb service is delivering about 3,500, which is a much larger scale. Energy Mate, on the other hand, is basically designed by the energy providers and with the support of New Zealand government to help people pay their power bills. So it's basically an advice service. Doesn't install like light bulbs and other appliances and things. It gives people tips on what they might do, and it gives people the option to move to a smooth pay system. Generally, a third of the homes visited by that service are in debt to energy providers, and it certainly doesn't give them the option to switch power providers. It's focused on, are you on the best plan for your existing power provider? So it's only limited to if you work with one of your power companies. They will come to you and talk to you about how you can pay their bills more easily. It's being delivered nationwide to about 1,000 households, mostly in the North Island. So it's actually very low uptake in the South Island, and there's the potential there to do far more. And I think it's a great idea that we should be helping those people who are struggling with their power bills to pay it off smartly. But the biggest benefit of using the power switch, where you can look at different providers, is you can save $500 just through that process alone. So an independent report looking at Energy Mate found that minimal savings for energy savings, power savings, and cost savings were made by residents about $150 per household. But that in fact went up. The power use went up in winter because, of course, people are finding the need for warmer homes in winter. So in fact, the overall savings were very minimal. So that's because most of the people they service, about 85%, are already using the best tariff that those energy providers offer. So in fact, that's a wee bit disappointing because you could think that 100% of people are given the best tariff they are available. So most people you'd expect the energy provider to tell you there's a better option for you that they offer. So and that's required by law. Every year the energy providers need to give people an update on what tariff they're on. So again, the EcoBold proposal is quick installation of energy efficient appliances, walk through the power switch tool to give you the energy savings in about between $500 and $700 per household saved through that visit.
Thanks so much, Tony. That's really comprehensive. Tim. Okay, so it was the same question from all three of you. That's great. So we do have a mover and a seconder. Are there any further questions? No. In that case, is there any debate? No. In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? Declare that carried. Thank you very much. I'm assuming all of you online are all good. Yep, some thumbs there. Most excellent. Okay. Suburban Regeneration Biennial Report.
Thanks.
That's right.
It's only one down.
Welcome. I know that we are running a little bit short on time on the report, so what I might do is take it as read and ask for any questions, because we still have several reports to go through. Do we have any questions on the Suburban Biennial Report? Any questions from anyone? Yanni.
Okay. I was quite surprised to see that the start work notice for Buck and Park had gone out in April on a project that was consulted on 2015 for a different community board. And it got me thinking just how many of these projects are we just getting on and doing without community engagement or consultation at a more recent level? Like, do you know what I mean? Like it just seems odd that a project would be nearly 7 years old would just suddenly get done, but then there's a whole new community that may have moved into the neighbourhood. There's other priorities that may have come up. So is there a kind of looking at the different actions as to the time taken since we've consulted and engaged and bringing them more relevant to the people that are in those communities now?
I'm not familiar with that particular project, so I'm not sure what consultation has been done more recently on that since the 2015. I'll need to take that question away and check and get back to you and answer.
I mean, I guess for that one, it's too late. It's already happened. I guess I was just trying to look forward and just get a sense of, with the master plan projects, if they've been engaged and consulted on quite a few years ago now, is there a process to kind of look and see if they're still relevant?
In terms of the actual outcomes, yes. If I can pick an example that I'm more familiar with, which would be Selwyn Street, that project was consulted on previously as part of the master plan back in 2012 as a concept stage, and then again in 2016 for more detailed design. The funding for that was delayed until currently the next financial year. So when the transport team pick it up for implementation, they will look at engaging with the community and again recognising there has been some significant changes in the area since 2012 and 2016. So yes, in that case.
Okay, that's good to hear.
They check in with the community board before they go to the community?
Yes. I believe the project manager. Yes, project managers will be appointed for that project in the new year, and they'll pick up that side of things, and we'll engage the process. We'll commence.
That's great. Okay. Are there any further questions from people? Can I just say thank you? I mean, to you, and you pass it back on to others as well. It's been really useful having these reports coming. during the term. It's good seeing the updates. I know it's frustrating for some communities because various projects have been delayed for various reasons over the years. But it's good that these reports have come regularly for us to be able to keep an eye and track on see the progress that is being made. So thank you for that. Any last questions? Do I have a mover to receive the report? Mike and Pauline. Is it glasses or was that a hand up? Yeah, okay. Right, any debate? No, in that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Any against? I declare that carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Events and Festivals Fund. Welcome, team. Councillor Davidson's happy to move the staff recommendation, and Deputy Mayor is happy to second.
How
So
good.
it's been a really long morning.
Don't we all come down?
They have done an excellent job.
Support
And
crew.
no, stay there. There may be questions.
Yeah.
I know that there has been a workshop and there has already been an opportunity for people to ask questions on this, and so there may not be much today. But do people have any further and additional questions to the ones that have been answered already? Aaron.
And it came up last year, and I think you even asked something around it as well, Sarah, is the beach volleyball that's played in town. Because there have been questions around, shipping a whole lot of sand in town. But the media coverage it gets, is that because it's played in the middle of town, it's getting the media coverage more than if we moved it to Sumner or Brighton?
That's a great question.
It's the unique location that's kind of stimulating.
Brooke can jump in on that one. So definitely a combination of the two. It's a national event that travels around the country, so it's got a really good national profile, but also the whole point of it being in Cathedral Square is that it's an exhibition style match, so people can kind of come across it and experience beach volleyball when they normally wouldn't, and it's the only place in the country where we are doing it in a central city space, so the media love that, they pick up on it and it gets extra profile. They are also looking this year to expand though and put some courts out on Sumner as well.
Yeah, because Sumner's a great location to show off as well, especially once you can bike there soon, would be kind of cool. Yeah. So the final on that, and is the Cathedral Square the best spot in town for it? They looked at others?
Yeah, they've looked at lots of different spaces. At the moment, it's kind of the only largest sort of hard surface space in the central city where they can fit a court. And with the works that's happening in Cathedral Square, they're actually, hopefully this year, going to be able to fit, next year, fit 2 courts. Cool. So, yeah, they have scoped that.
Yeah. Okay, Tim.
Could this be, or is this part of the refocusing of Cathedral Square as a venue for events? Because it does seem, following the earthquake and as we've slowly recovered, that it's been kind of forgotten.
Yeah, so I think they were just really keen to get a central city space for an event like this. Obviously, like I said before, we were very limited, but it is fantastic to be able to have these events back in Cathedral Square and drive people back there because, we haven't been able to host a lot in that space and they're doing really well at driving attendance there amongst everything else that's going on, but they're doing a great job.
So is this going to be other things happening in there? Is that going to be a focus of the teams to try and get other things in the square?
Events in general?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've relocated Te Ramamai this year, and so that will be finishing with Cathedral Square being a hub space where we'll have a lot of activity happening, so that's in June. And just depending on the works, we'll definitely promote that space because it is a fantastic venue for events and we're really excited to use it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cathedral Square has significantly tidied up in the last year as well. That new site plus the old post office and things, and it's that whole area is looking really good.
Yeah, agreed.
Any further questions? No. In that case, it has been moved and seconded. Any debate? Sorry, Phil.
Yeah, sorry. Well, yeah, sorry, Sarah. I unfortunately I didn't go to. There was a wee briefing the other day on the Santa Parade, and I wasn't there because I was crook. But why do we not, someone might be able to answer it for me, why don't we just give the Santa Parade a little bit more rather than passing forward $119,000 into next year, please?
Sorry, I missed the end of that. Why?
Could you repeat the question, Phil?
I see Santa Parade has asked for $90,000 and we're going to give them either 45 or 40, I'm not quite sure what, but we're putting forward 119,000 we're going to put forward into next year for our fund. Why don't we give them some of that now?
So we use that.
Why don't we a bit more?
Yeah, so the 119,000 that we're rolling forward from DRF, we've used that as part of the allocation across all the events. So it's given us the ability to give more funding to more events rather than having such a limited amount. So that love has been spread amongst all of them, and Centre Parade was one of the events that we've given a recommendation of 45 because we've got the ability to do so and also equally provide funding for other events that require it as well.
Yeah. So it is being used as part of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Anything else? No, any debate? In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against? No, I declare that carried. Thank you very much for all your work on that. Next, the sub-delegation of time extensions for heritage grants. Sam, would you like to move this one? And Aaron can second it. I'll wait till you sit down.
Thank you.
So I missed that completely. Do I want to hear that?
I just said Tim was closer to heritage than I am.
Oh, I think you might be right. No. Okay, so we don't need to use up all the time if we have it available. Are there any questions? No. Okay. Do I have a mover? Oh, sorry, got the mover. Seconder. Any debate? No. In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? Declare that carried. Thank you for all your work.
I didn't do any of it.
And just before karakia, it is the last meeting for the committee, so I'm going to take, indulgence of the chair, and I've got 2 minutes, to keep you from your lunch, and acknowledge that this is the last committee meeting. We've had 19 meetings since November 2019, with some gaps in the schedule due to extended COVID interruptions in 2020, as well as breaks for the long-term and annual plan hearings. We've had very broad terms of reference, and this has meant that for the most part as a committee we've been reactive to reports coming for decisions, although there has been some more specific areas such as social housing where we've been more proactive with more in-depth oversight in the first few months especially. And in that space we also oversaw the development of the community housing strategy adopted last year, which asks staff to take a broader look at housing within the city, not only to help meet the needs for social housing but innovative models in partnership with others. The work we've done with OCHT this term to enable a faster move to warmer, drier homes and to rebuild our social housing has been excellent, but there's still a lot that needs doing. Work programme highlights include Kia Tura Te Ao, the climate resilience strategy, establishing the sustainability fund for climate-related community initiatives, establishing the intangible heritage fund to sit alongside the heritage incentive grants, and that covers a gap in the implementation of the heritage strategy. We also oversaw the review of the Strengthening Community Strategy, which had not been done for many years and now reflects better our role as an organisation in community connection and wellbeing. We've had the responsibility for making decisions on a significant amount of community funding over the term, funding allocated to protect heritage and support the arts, to act on climate change, to boost community connections and resilience, and to make our city a more interesting, attractive and vibrant place to live. In the more proactive space governance-wise, we've also instituted new reporting for our community-facing areas, and the reports have had excellent feedback from councillors and the community. They have been new this term and have involved much more transparent reporting on the work of Parks Unit, libraries, art gallery, rec and sport, amongst others. Making sure that the decisions made by the committee that are not yet complete are transferred into the system and into any new committee will be really important. And I know that some actions were lost between committees and things in the transfer over last time. And so making sure that the community expectations from those decisions are met is really important. So I'd like to end with some thanks. Thanks to Councillor Coker for being a thoughtful and active deputy, ready to step into the chair when needed. Also to Councillor Johansson for his work chairing the funding subcommittee. Thanks to the staff that have helped out, especially Simone, our incredibly able and astute committee advisor, coordinating the agenda and wrangling reports, as well as liaising with the community on public forum and deputation requests. And Mary and Lynn, who have sat next to me for a lot of the time as well as advisors. Other staff have helped with the running of meetings, real-time creation of the meetings, on the screen above me, or enabling openness and transparency for our decision making via the live stream. Thank you at the back. And thank you to all. Thank you for your constructive debate during the term. It's been a really interesting and motivating process, and I look forward to seeing, hopefully, many of you around the table again next term and doing more of this work for our communities. And with that, I'll ask Councillor Davidson to close with a karakia.
Just a wee moment before then, just thank you, Sarah, for the work you've done and lead. So thank you.
Thanks. Shucks. Oh, yeah.
I'm going to take you.
Mike.
Kia whakairea te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakatake ai. Haumea, huie, tai kia.
And with that, I declare the meeting closed.